It's the Thursday night big show, as Larry calls it. That's right. I got my guys with me, Vish and Larry, and there is a big game I heard on the horizon for the San Francisco 49ers. We're going to talk about that. We're just going to talk about the state of the 49ers in general, and we're going to do all of that next. All right. Welcome back to Last Second Sports, where we are giving you our take down to the last second. And as I said, it's a big show Thursday, which means I got my guy Vish and my guy Larry with me. Larry, I feel a little bad that you're down there all by your lonesome. So we'll start with you tonight. How you doing tonight, my man?
Man, I'm doing fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Just was down in Santa Clara today, was in the locker room, had a chance to talk to a number of players about the matchup, had a chance to talk to Brock and Steve Wilkes and Chris Forster at the podium. Feeling good, man. Got some great questions asked this week and some phenomenal content, and I'm fired up, man. This is the first time in 3 weeks that the three of us have been together because of Vish's international traveling exploits and the Thursday nighter with the Giants.
International.
Or well, not international, but he wasn't
international-ish.
Right.
Sort of.
We're calling Puerto Rico international. Hey, Larry, I had to get a tan on.
I think of New Orleans as international, so, that's me.
Here's what I got to say to you, Larry, all right? When you went to where did you go? You went to training camp, the Giants training camp, and you came back with the tan. I said, Larry, nice tan. I just spent a week in Puerto Rico.
Nice tan.
You can't say that.
Incredible tan.
You, yeah.
I mean, that is just an unbelievable. I mean, people don't realize you were pasty as hell before you left.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, good. Yeah.
It's just common courtesy. Is it that hard to get that kind of courtesy, Jesse?
You're looking so rested and just fired up.
I just want to let you both know. Now, when we go on Vish's channel, Vish does find the worst possible picture of everybody and throw it up, which I think is hilarious. When you guys are on my channel, I find very good pictures of y'all. And not only that, I make everybody look tan. Now, you guys look fantastic. Everybody loses weight. Everybody looks tan. I am very generous with my thumbnail making. I'm just going to throw that out there. I expect some respect when we go on your channel, Vish. Every time it's like Larry's wearing the tight jersey. I'm blinking or making a weird face.
Dude,
that ain't right.
Google
right.
Jesse Naylor 49ers, and for whatever reason, that's what shows up. What do you want me to do? And then Larry, you look good. I'm just trying to show everybody how good you look.
That ain't right. That ain't right. But you know what? When I took that picture, I said to myself, you know what? I'm going to be staring at this picture. My great grandkids will be staring at that picture. I mean, it's it's virtuals forever.
Have you gotten any thoughts from Kevin on the picture?
I have not, but I will. I'll get back to him and then I'll get back to you, letting you know what he said.
Perfect. Appreciate it.
It's a big show. What's up, Matt? How you doing, man? Thanks for tapping in. It's a big show when Brother Bob comes in and dropping the $2 super chats to let everybody know that he loves Vish and I. But PP, you're in love with Brock Purdy. Starting early, and he's not stopping. He's got another one all ready to go. Over or under, PP says Brock or Purdy 100 times tonight. I'm going to take the under, actually. How many times has he said it already? Just once? Just once, I think. I got 99 to go.
When did he say it?
He was talking about his interview. He did an interview with him.
You're right. Good catch. All right, Brother Bob, get the counter going. Let us know at the end of the show. I'm going to take the under as well.
I'm going under. Okay. First topic of the night. And this started really, I noticed during the game this last Sunday on Twitter, and then it kind of bled into my content a little bit this week. I imagine it's bled into your content this week. But there's this perception that the 49ers defense just isn't as good as it should be. And so we'll start with you first, Vish. Do you buy into that perception or that thought? And if so, like what needs to be done to fix it? And if not, why don't you buy into it? What is your thoughts on the 49ers defense?
Yeah, so I don't buy into this perception that they're not as good as they need to be. I think that the offense is playing at such an uncharacteristically high level. I mean, they're playing nearly flawless football through 4 weeks that any small blemish on the defense's record feels like the only blemish for the 49ers in the football game. So therefore, we seem to focus in on it a little bit more. I think part of it is also maybe people having different expectations based on preseason what Arizona was without understanding like, hey, if we're 4 weeks into the season and Arizona has a real run game and a real run game that's going to give anybody problems throughout the season with James Conner, and their scheme is very good. So I think that plays into it a little bit. But if you wanted to ask me what I feel the number one issue with the Niners defense is, because I don't know that there's necessarily an issue. I think they're still very good, but I do think there's a level that they can get to that's even beyond this one. It's two things. One, I feel like they're just still getting comfortable. I think Steve Wilks. I don't know why I called him Wilks. Steve Wilks is getting acclimated to his personnel, and I think his personnel is getting acclimated to him. People forget that D'Amico went through some growing pains too early in his tenure when he first became the DC at the start of 2021, and now he had to deal with Josh Norman playing corner. But D'Amico was there through the entire Saleh installation of this defense, and it was a kind of a continuation with where he took this scheme. And even then, he had to find his feet. Similarly, I think with Wilks in this defense, there is some bit of just getting comfortable with each other, what Wilks likes to call in certain deep situations versus what suits this personnel in certain situations. But I will get to the one thing that I do think is the crux of the issue right now, and that is I just don't think there's enough disguise to their defense. Right now, the Niners don't disguise their defense 78.8% of the time. The league average defense doesn't disguise 73% of the time. So they're a little higher than the league average. They play middle of the field closed, which means single high with a single post safety 56% of the time. They play middle of the field open, which is too high 43% of the time. They line up in middle field closed, which is single high 39.4% of the time. And that same 39.4% or 39% of the four, or excuse me, let me start over. They line up middle of the field closed and play middle of the field closed 39.4% of the time.
Okay.
They line up middle of the field open and play middle of the field open 39.4% of the time. Only 22.2% of the time is there a disguise in terms of lining up in middle of the field closed. 3.6% of the time they switch from closed to open, so they drop a safety out. Usually teams rotate down anyway, so that's not a number that's shocking when you're talking about disguises. But 16.6% of the time, which is the other number, which is the other half of the 20.2% of the time, they line up in middle of the field open and they rotate down from too high. I think when we look at Steve Wilks' MO, we look at his history, we do think of a guy who gets creative. We do think of a guy who has some exotic blitzes. And I think one of D'Amico's biggest successes was all the sim pressures he had in his bag on third down. He didn't have that many different ones. They would always line up, and they were all about getting this defensive line one-on-ones. And Wilks still does that in some capacity with 5 defensive linemen or just with the doubles that Bosa gets and how they shift the line based on how the protection is to get Javon Hargrave a one-on-one, which he wins all the time, or Eric Armstead and one-on-one because he wins all the time. And so we can maybe go back through those numbers and explain them a little more slowly. But the
Yeah.
crux of it is that I do think that they need to disguise a little bit more, and I do expect them to do that. I think they've gotten into just lining them up, playing a lot of man coverage in third down, and it's yielded success because they haven't played receiving cores that have really tested the strength. But for example, this week against Dallas, I think if you line up and play man on third down with a 5-man rush, or you just line up and play man, CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott will eat that alive a little bit. You got to play zone.
I'm gonna circle back around, help Jimbo out here, maybe some of the others in the chat, and then also ask you a follow-up question. But before I do that, I want to get to Larry. Don't want to ISO him out of this show. Larry, what are your thoughts overall on the defense of the 49ers?
Well, we know it's a good defense, right? It was the number 1 defense a year ago. It added Javon Hargrave. So we know it's a good defense, but Steelers offensively are lame. The Giants offensively didn't have Barkley. Arizona, signed their quarterback, 3 weeks before the season started. The Rams were the only good offensive team that they've played, and they gave up 23 points to the Rams. And then also, to me, the other aspect of this thing is that um, Wilkes, if you look at the numbers, has rushed a lot with 4, but those timely blitzes and the offense's dominance, and the offense has scored 30 a game, more than 30 a game, but 30 in every game, has made has made it an easier game to defend in the second half for the defense. And then my big concern was the corner depth and the defensive end depth. And we don't know about Luter, we don't know about Womack. Jameson's a Carolina Panther. Their corner depth has already been tested. They already picked up Kendall Sheffield. And then, to me, the big stat is the one that says that Drake Jackson, Cleveland Farrell, and Kerry Hyder have 8 combined quarterback hits in 4 games. In 243 pass rush snaps, that trio has 8 combined quarterback hits. And so I really think that's a problem. That's a major problem. And I think that they need additional upgrades on that defensive end spot. They're good inside, but their backups at defensive end are nowhere close to as good as Ebukam and Amenahue and Jordan Willis from a year ago. And it just hasn't been exposed yet because they score 30 to 35 a game, and they've got Bosa and Jackson and really good tackles, and it hasn't really shown itself. But the backup defensive ends are nowhere close to as good as they were last year, and they might want to consider picking up a Randy Gregory or somebody like that. They may want to start looking around because I think this problem isn't going away. Kerry Hyder is a veteran locker room presence, but he doesn't bend the edge. And Cleveland Farrell was nice in the preseason, but he's got 10 sacks in 4 seasons, and he's been shut out the last 2 weeks. And even Drake Jackson got 3 sacks in week 1, but if you look at his pressures, 9 of the 11 came in the first 2 games. He's only had 2 pressures the last 2 weeks. So I think that defensive end group outside of Bosa is questionable.
Most certainly. I want to give Ultimate Chili Nachos with queso and guacamole a shout out here, but I've got to correct you. If you're going to call him Jerome, then you have to say Hargrove, not Hargrave. So it's Jerome Hargrove is what Shannon Sharp called him. So
right.
I'm just going to give you a little correction. You got his last name wrong, but good effort. Good effort.
Yeah, well done.
All right, Vish, I wanted to circle back to this. So you talked about, you threw a lot out there.
Yeah, let me
middle
explain.
field closed, middle field open.
Let me explain okay, go ahead.
Let me get it back real quick.
Yeah, for sure.
Just in a roundabout way, Jimbo, what he's saying is if the 49ers show you a defense pre-snap, that is likely going to be the defense that you get post-snap, which is pretty rare in the NFL. In the NFL, most teams post-snap are going to try to confuse you. They're going to move their safeties around afterwards to give you a different coverage look than what you thought it was, all those things. My question to you, though, Vish, really comes down to, okay, they show you middle field open or middle field close, but on those plays, how much are they switching the coverages? So you can have middle field open, but it could be a cover 2, a cover 4, a cover 6. It could be man. How often are they switching up just the overall coverages, or do you know that? Like how many? What's the percentage of cover 3 versus?
I don't know the full numbers on that, but
okay.
I think we've all seen the Niners defense to know that they primarily play 3D.
Yeah,
they play quarters. That's what they like to play on early downs, and then they might play a couple snaps to cover 6, depending on who they're playing and who the starting cornerback is. They'll occasionally get into cover 2, but they don't really play a lot of cover 2. And then on third downs, they've been playing single high and they've been playing a lot of tight man. But the reason to me the disguise doesn't matter is because when we're talking about a defense like this, that's this fast and covers like this, one of the things I think Saleh unlocked in 2020 and D'Amico continued is when you rotate your safeties and change structure just a little bit for quarterbacks, you just make them hesitate for a split second. And to me, a hesitation for a split second against this defensive line and this defense in particular means that the quarterback gets sacked. And when we talk about, well, why are the 49ers pressure numbers so high? Why are the 49ers sack numbers so low? I'm not saying that this is the exact reason. There's a lot more that plays into it than simply just changing the coverage picture on the quarterback. But to me, it's part of this conversation, because when we do get into and look at what D'Amico did, really at the end of the years in playoffs, when they would kind of sit in a too high and they would rotate down and play three deep, or they would play three buzz, or they would play, quarters, or they would play cover six, they would do stuff like that. What it did for even quarterbacks like Aaron Rodgers, who's seen every defense and knows, he just wouldn't know between, these six zone defenses, which one the Niners were going to be in, just because of safety rotation and pre-snap everything. They would kind of line up in the quarters umbrella a little bit, especially down the end of the season. And that's where I think it helped in terms of getting sacks. And I think Larry's right. Part of it is that the defensive line isn't as good. But I also would say, when you look at the number of snaps that Jerome Hargrove and Eric Armstead end up logging over the course of a game, especially next to Bosa, they should have more sacks even without the backups being not as good, because those three players are frankly dominant, and they're frankly having all three very, very strong seasons. And that's where I do think it's not that I think Wilkes is doing a poor job, but I think that as they continue to get a feel for each other, changing coverage picture a little bit might help aid in this problem that we're continuing to discuss with the 49ers defense, which is really just two things. One is sacks, and then the other one is, oh, hey, they let up a 99-yard drive. And so people are really, really pissy about that.
Wait, one other thing.
Go
one
ahead.
thing, just to jump in here, as somebody who's done that quality control job, this is too small of a sample size. Why? Because the 49ers have won by 23. They've won by 19. They've won by 18. There's only one game that's been a one-score game. Everybody knows that the numbers that you could use in that Pittsburgh game, you could just throw out right now.
That's fair.
The 49ers are a better offensive team and a better defensive team than the numbers show. Brock is only playing a balanced passing, attacking offense for 3 quarters, and then they're taking the air out of the ball and running it, and they don't care if they run it effectively or ineffectively. They're just going to run it because it's about milking the clock. So the Niners offensively are scoring 30 a game, but they actually are more impressive because they're really only playing offense aggressively for 3 quarters. And then defensively, that Pittsburgh game, I mean, they got into a soft shell, and
Right.
I think there were so many plays that they had a monster lead in that they just allowed completions. I almost feel like, you got to look at like first quarter and first half stuff, and then they went all man against the Rams in the second half
Right.
against Puka because they were trying to clamp down. So all I would say is somebody who's massaged those numbers, stats lie, liars use statistics. You got to watch all the games. But I would also say that for a lot of teams, you can look at your tendencies 4 weeks in. But when you've played as many blowout games as the Niners have, the statistical profiles really are filled with inconsistencies.
I think that's a great point, and it definitely applies here. And I'm glad you brought it up because it's much needed context to those numbers. But I will also say I do think from a visual test that we have seen the 49ers kind of line up and play what they're in. Like against the Giants and the Rams, like you brought up, they played a lot of man, and a lot of it was press man. Let's get in front of those receivers. There was a single safety in the middle of the field. Like pre-snap, it looks like man, and post-snap, it was man. And it was just straight man coverage. It's not like, hey, we're going to banjo, the bunch or do something a little bit different to confuse the quarterback. Like it was straight man coverage. And so I do think that's been the case. But then, of course, context also matters to that, where you could say that maybe the Niners felt like they could afford to do that when you look at the talent of their defense versus the talent of the offenses they've been playing. Either way, I think that they have to play zone coverage very effectively versus the Dallas Cowboys. If they play man, they'll get beat. Dak Prescott will throw a party if they play man. That's how I look at it. And so I think they have to play zone coverage. That's how they've played them the last 2 years. They played Tampa 2. They've played 3 deep. They've played quarters. And they've done a very, very good job at squeezing their route concepts and playing very disciplined zone defense. I think they're going to have to do that on Sunday night. And I think they will do that to win as well. The interesting thing is how much will they trust Mr. Isaiah Oliver or maybe they go back to trusting Ambry Thomas for the 5th straight time that nobody knows why. Who knows?
There's a couple things that I wanted to bring up when it comes to the 49ers defense. So we know that Wilkes is obviously new to the team. That in itself, you would think, all right, maybe they started a little bit slow. Also, we factor in that Bosa was there just before week 1. Those things make sense. But just looking at the 49ers defense over the last couple of years, in 2021, if you guys remember, they gave up a ton of rushing yards very early on in that season. They couldn't stop the run at all. I think one game they held the team of like the first 7, a team under 100 yards, and the rest it was like 130, 150, 180. They couldn't stop the run. Then second half of the season, they clamped down and they came into their own. Last year was similar in the sense that they had a game where I believe they created 3 turnovers, but outside of that, there was a good stretch there where they weren't creating a lot of turnovers. And then second half of the season, they started to create a ton of turnovers. What I'm getting at is the 49ers defense traditionally starts slow somewhere. And this year, it seems that maybe the slow start is the sack number, but they're still producing at a very high level. I think when you add in that Wilkes is new, they start out slow anyways. Bosa was late to the game. It makes sense why they're starting out a little bit slow. But there is one thing that the 49ers don't necessarily have, or at least I don't know if they have the answer on their roster. They've had somebody from the nickel position since I can remember in this whole defensive era that Shanahan has been here. They've had a nickel corner that was a very good blitzer. I don't know if they have that on this roster. And if they don't, that might make things a little bit tougher when you're going to disguise blitzes and roll coverages and all those types of things, because K'Wan Williams, his blitz timing was unbelievable. Jimmy Ward was actually a pretty good blitzer, and Talanoa, I know, is a good blitzer, but now if you bring him near the line of scrimmage, it's kind of obvious that he's probably going to blitz. So I don't know if that's something that they have. I know that when we talk nickel corners, we usually talk strictly coverage. The blitz package, especially here, is interesting to talk about because I don't want to create pressure in blitzes by sending Fred Warner and leaving the middle of the field open because he's so great in coverage. So what are your guys' thoughts on that?
Before you kick it to Larry, I would like to add that we haven't really seen them go back to that nickel pressure with Oliver after they spammed it like 8 times in the second half versus the Rams. If you remember, they kept calling that same nickel blitz to the strong side with Isaiah Oliver. They called it like 5 times. I'm exaggerating when I say 8, like 5 times in the second half versus the Rams. And we haven't really seen them go back to that since then, or go back to it in that volume. You're right. Go ahead, Larry.
Well, I was just going to say that I think, Steve, if you look at last year and this year, okay, so at Carolina last year, he as far as his blitz look, I mean, he was blitzing, where's the number? It was a higher percentage. 31%, ninth most in the league last year. This year with the Niners, his blitz percentage is down to 22%, which is 21st in the NFL. But then when you look at the blitz success rate, it's 37%, and that's 4th in the league. So I actually think Steve has really timed his blitz as well. The other thing is that he wants to go predominantly, doing it with his front 4. I think they didn't send a 5 or a 6-man pressure until halfway through the third quarter in this last game. And they rushed 4 the entire first half. So it was almost like they decided they wanted to see the young quarterback we'll spring it on him. We won't give him time to adjust. We'll spring it on him in a key moment in the second half. And they had success with it. I also think that they've gone up against, some mobile quarterbacks. So I think that's a big part of their desire to not blitz. But I think you're hitting on a point that is correct in that Isaiah Oliver is a converted corner. He's a bigger bodied guy. And he was brought in to defend the bigger slot receivers, but he's not necessarily a missile at the quarterback. He's more of a coverage player. So, I think that you're going to see Steve use less of, either him or Lenore really off the as blitzers, because I think their skill set doesn't fit it as well. I think you'll see him, dial up blitzes using other guys.
Right on. All right. We got some super chats. Let's get through these before they get backed up on us. Raphael says, who's number 11 will have the better game on Sunday? That's a very good question. Very good question. Wow. And how do you equate that? Ooh. I'm going to go with our number 11. I'll go with Ayuk. What do you think, Fish?
Yeah, I would go with Ayuk probably having the better statistical output game. I think Micah Parsons is going to have an impact that might not show up on the stat sheet just because I think the Niners are going to have such a sound plan for him. They always do, and I think they will. But I think he'll definitely have a greater impact on what the Niners are doing versus Ayuk's impact on what the Cowboys are doing. And that's no disrespect to Ayuk. He's playing like a top 5 receiver this year. That's just Micah Parsons is a special player. But I am specific to Ayuk also just intrigued with this matchup because I think Gilmore is an interesting matchup for Ayuk. I want to see Ayuk against a corner that's going to get in his face and press him, not play off coverage. And they call him bump and run Gilmore for a reason. And I think like that's the one thing in Ayuk's evolution. That's like the last part because that was the one thing he just didn't get off the ball too well at times at Arizona State. And sometimes it's lingered with the 49ers. And now he's basically like just evolved his game to a point where none of that exists. But man, would it be nice to see because Gilmore's still got a little bit of something left. He's not the same guy he was, but it'll be nice to see. Like I'm projecting Ayuk as a top 5 receiver with that on Sunday Night Football against Stephon Gilmore having the kind of game that he's been having every single other game of this year. That would really put him on the map as a top 5 receiver. So I'm excited to see that.
Larry, what about you?
I mean, they're both, really, really pivotal. I mean, I think, the Cowboys, number 11, is going to have a bigger impact on whether or not they win. But Brandon Ayuk is the NFL's highest graded offensive player. And he has absolutely been an amazing player from the standpoint he has caught every ball that's been thrown to him this year.
No, besides the one that was challenged by McVay and the Rams, that was a catch, but then they ruled it incomplete, but he actually did catch it.
I thought it was like 27 for 27. I don't think
It should be 27 for 28. Because it was the one after he hurt his shoulder, if you remember in the first drive against the Rams.
The out on the right.
They threw him and out, yeah.
Either way, Ayuk.
Your point stands. Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
Well, Ayuk just seems like he is just so special this year. I mean, it's just, he's an amazing player. Actually, you're right, because I'm looking here at 17 receptions on 20 targets. But still, that's an incredibly high percentage on that many targets.
Put it like this. In his 2 healthy games, the Steelers game and the Cardinals game, he caught every one of his targets.
He's acting like every ball that's in the air is his. And he's attacking it like it must be caught. Low, high, I just think that in some ways – I think the Niners really have a couple mismatches here. I think one of them is the Niner run game against Dallas's run D, but the other is Ayuk on whoever's guarding him. I don't see now with no Diggs, I don't see a corner out there that's going to be able to neutralize Ayuk. I think he's going to be able to do what he wants. He describes, if you look at the numbers too, Dallas is really susceptible to the passes in the middle of the field, and Ayuk loves to run the crossers, whether it be shallow cross, intermediate cross, deep cross. He loves to run across the middle of the field. He owns it. He doesn't tiptoe. He's not afraid of the hit. To me, I think he's borderline unstoppable going across the middle on all 3 levels. And I think you're going to see him catch at least 3 or 4 balls in the middle of the field.
He's an interesting player to think about when there's a lot of cases that training camp has shown that it doesn't matter. But I think in his case, sometimes it shows that it does matter because one thing that we saw during training camp was how dialed in he was, Larry. I mean, everybody saw it. Everybody saw it immediately. Everybody talked about it throughout the entirety of training camp, and it just carried over into the season and has not stopped. So Ayuk came into this season clearly on a mission and has ran through the first few games of this season continually on that mission. And it's crazy because I know that he's always going to be compared to those other guys in his draft class, CeeDee Lamb, and he especially, because the 49ers potentially could have had CD if they wanted to, and they really like CD, and then they ended up getting Ayuk. So, but when you look at Ayuk this year, he has less catches than CD, but he's also played one less game. He has more yards and more touchdowns. He's really playing big time football right now. So I'm excited to watch him this Sunday as well.
Dude, real quick, last thing before you go, because you went to the Ayuk CD Lamb, I wouldn't have put him above CD Lamb like even last year, and he was excellent last year.
Agree.
This year, dude, he's better than CD Lamb.
Yes.
The stats just don't matter to me. He's got more juice than CD Lamb. Dude, Larry talked about it. He catches everything. Every time the ball's in the air, he catches it. Bro, look at how early JT Sullivan's capital A anticipation for Brock Purdy. It's when he plays with Brandon Ayuk, and that means he's so quarterback friendly for Brock Purdy, because when he sees it, he knows that he can trust putting the ball just out there, and he knows Ayuk is going to adjust the top of his route and be there to make the pass look accurate. And that's a very, very special ability for him to separate at the top of his routes. And then I just think the strength he plays with just doesn't get enough credit. He is strong as an ox. He is really strong. He used to get bumped off his spot. He doesn't anymore. He plays with great urgency. And dude, after the catch, how quickly he gets north and south, and like how quick, like the first guy never brings him down, all of that. Like, dude, he's a top 5 receiver right now. Absolutely. I'm glad you brought up the CD Lamb thing. Like, he's just better than him now.
It's funny. He plays bigger. CD's taller and heavier, and yet Ayuk
is CD heavier?
Well, they list CD at 200, and they list Ayuk at Ayuk's 6 feet 200. Let's see. Let me see that. I think they list CD Lamb at 6'2", 200 and change. But either way,
Ayuk looks thicker, right?
Taller. Yeah, Ayuk to me looks stronger. I definitely think you can jam CD Lamb at the line of scrimmage. He wins with quickness. He's got better quickness than Ayuk, but I think Ayuk functionally is plays quite a bit bigger and stronger.
Yeah, I agree. I think CD Lamb is a little bit more acrobatic and maybe has a little bit ball skills in terms of making an acrobatic catch than Ayuk. Yeah. But we're seeing with Ayuk and Purdy that Ayuk doesn't have to make acrobatic catches because he's where he needs to be every single time, on time, and he's created the necessary separation to catch the ball. And he has a quarterback who's trusting him to just put it out there on time and on schedule for him. So he doesn't need to win acrobatically because he's winning before that.
I think they both have a very good catch radius. For me, the separation is, I think Ayuk's the full route tree. I would take Ayuk over CD. I would take Ayuk when the ball's not going to him over CD. I mean, he's a phenomenal blocker. We know that. Where I think CD's a little bit better than Ayuk is on the go ball. And I also think that once he does catch the ball, he is very, very shifty and can get away a little bit more than Ayuk. But both of them have their strengths. Both of them are very good. I do think I agree with you. I think in this moment right now, Ayuk is showing to be the better player at this point in time, for sure.
I agree with you, and that's a great point. The last thing I want to add, and this is kind of my knock against CD Lamb, and sometimes I knock Justin Jefferson for the same thing, and this is just personal preference. But when you line up and play in the slot like 80-90% of the time, like Brandon Ayuk lines up on the outside. He wins on the outside. He lines up as the X receiver in the 49ers offense 90% of the time. Now, they move him into the slot too, but he doesn't get free accesses. He doesn't get to be the top guy in the bunch. He doesn't get those kinds of things. They make him line up on the outside and play a little. And no disrespect to CeeDee Lamb, but again, when you're lining up in the slot as much as he does, I do think that that's a little different ball game. And he certainly has the skill set for it, but I think Ayuk has that skill set too. And what Ayuk is bringing that I think CeeDee Lamb doesn't have at this point, like today, that Ayuk has, is Ayuk is scaring people vertically. He just has a little more juice than CeeDee Lamb, and I think that's why he's able to play on the outside while CeeDee Lamb plays inside so much.
Matt says if they see Parsons lined up against Trent, we better run through him. I think they should try to run through him anyways. To me, one of my frustrations watching the Dallas game last year, and then it started again in the Philadelphia game, is I think you run it at a pass rusher like Parsons. You run at a pass rusher like Hassan Reddick. Like you run at those guys early, or you allow them to get upfield and then throw screens behind them. And it took the 49ers a while to get into that game plan. They finally started to do it as soon as the second half began, and it worked very well for them. I wish they had done it a little bit earlier. Hopefully they take what they saw in the second half of that playoff game and start to implement it as much as possible. Now, one thing that is tough about that is Parsons really can line up in a lot of different areas. They can hide him a little bit better than most pass rushers because he actually can play in coverage if he needs to as well. So it makes things interesting with Parsons.
Yeah, I think the key with Parsons, and I think Kyle's got to be on his game, because I think you've got to fool Parsons a little bit. You got to give him a bunch of eye candy, and then you got to combo block him with non-obvious players, so he's got head on a swivel. So he's looking for Kittle picking him off, and he's looking for the crackback, and he's looking all around. He's looking for the combo block that he's not anticipating, because his pursuit ability is crazy. His acceleration is unmatched. His effort and motor are second to none. So when you're smart, and he's smart, and when you can accelerate like that, and you're playing with a crazy motor, you got to create the hesitation. The hesitation has to come from the pre-snap eye candy that I think Kyle's going to have to offer, but it also has to come from blocking him on combo blocks with a couple different ways, so that he's kind of looking all around, looking for how he's going to get picked off. And the Niners have. I thought Kittle had a couple of absolutely devastating blocks in the last game, and they were angled blocks where the defender wasn't really. He was getting blocked by the guy in front of him, and here came Kittle off the side. And I'd like to see the Niners try to go that route with Parsons. I mean, last year in the playoff game against the Niners, the Dallas lined him up in 6 different spots. And believe it or not, they weren't afraid of going against Trent. He had 12 more snaps against Trent than he had against McGlinchey. So they'll move him all over the place to find advantages. But to me, he's a great pursuit player. So you'd rather run at him than run away from him. But he's also really strong at the point and will throw guys away like tissue paper. So you better kind of fool him a little bit and just create a little sliver of hesitation so you can do your stuff. Otherwise, it's going to be tough. And I think they're going to have to help Colton. Colton's been really good as a run blocker. He's struggled so far as a pass protector. And to slow down Parsons, you're going to have a heavy dose of run and quick passes and a lot of pre-snap eye candy.
Yeah, I agree with you. And Arizona kind of put that blueprint out there. They used a lot of motion to create gap and numbers advantages for themselves in the run game, and they kind of exposed Dallas's defense for it. Now, Dallas's defense also played a little bit differently against New England without Trayvon Diggs than they did against Arizona. So there were a few adjustments made by them. They went a little less man, a little more vanilla. I saw them play a little more Tampa 2 from what I remember. I didn't watch that game like fully, though. I only watched parts of it. So they did do those things differently, but you're absolutely right in regard to the eye candy. I think that's the most important thing. And then the one thing I do want to add to it is I think Dallas's defensive line, the players surrounding Parsons, don't get enough credit. I think there's a plan for Parsons. I think Parsons is a really good player, but I also think, hey, Tank Lawrence is a stud. Like when we're talking about, hey, who's the best defensive end against the run in the NFL? To me, number 90 on the Cowboys is in that conversation, has been in it for years. And he's really good as a pass rusher too. Dante Fowler is a pretty good player. He's not the player that everybody expected when he was drafted out of Florida 3rd overall, but he's really good. Dorrance Armstrong's a nice player. Osa, I can't pronounce his last name. Osa's good. Osa's a good little pass rusher. So they have talented players around Parsons who maybe don't get enough credit, but they play with great team speed and effort. I just feel like what Matt says ultimately is going to happen, not just to Parsons, just because the Niners have just such a definitive size advantage in terms of their offense versus Dallas's defense that's very fast, but not very big.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to have to prove that they can stop the run game. So that's going to be a thing. Brother Bob says Prime Vision with Next Gen is cool. It shows the game as all 22. It's good to know.
Mm-hmm.
That's dope.
That's
Smack
the future,
Jones.
bro. That's the future, I think.
That is the future, yeah. Smack Jones says, "What's up, fellas? The test will be passed for both teams as long as it isn't a one-sided victory. This will be a Debo and a Kittle game. Trust me." All right, I like it.
I agree
Take
on the
word.
Debo, because I think this game is going to be about the Niners imposing the fact that they're just a bigger, more physical team than Dallas. And that as long as they avoid negative plays and turnovers, they'll just outlast Dallas the same way they did in the playoffs. And usually when they're ready to get in that kind of football game, they get Debo the ball. But I will add, just to, add on to our initial conversation about Ayuk involved in that. Like, dude, just because Debo and Kittle have a physical reputation and CMC as well, like I feel like it just doesn't mean we just don't talk enough about how physical Ayuk is too. Like that dude is really physical as well. So perhaps my perception of that it could be wrong because maybe Ayuk is the one who sets the physical tone, and I wouldn't be surprised if he does because he's pretty aggressive and physical as well.
Debo earns the name Debo when he gets the ball. Ayuk earns it without the ball.
That's well said. I like that.
Dazza says, "Is it worth blitzing with Warner more?" So we talked about this a little bit. I personally, I don't mind blitzing Warner from time to time, but I would prefer that he's not the blitzer most of the time. That's just me personally.
PP?
I mean, it's all about health too. I mean, I like Greenlaw as a blitzer, but is Greenlaw, what's his health situation? He's got an ankle.
Yeah.
The Niners only have one guy. It's Elijah Mitchell, who didn't practice today, by the way. Everybody else, even guys that got rest days like Trent and CMC yesterday, those guys were all back out there today. Jawan was playing, Dre, Mooney, Ayuk, Debo. They all went today. So the only two guys that are the Niners are almost full strength, except for Feliciano, who I think is going to be out with the concussion, and he's not even a starter. And then Elijah Mitchell, who also is not a starter. He hurt his knee last Thursday at practice, and I don't think he's going in this game.
Dude, they're gonna play. They're all gonna play. This is a game that those guys wouldn't have to walk to miss. This is Sunday Night Football against the Dallas Cowboys. This is the biggest game of the season so far. This is the game everybody wants to watch. It's the most hyped game. I haven't seen the Niners talk nationally before a game this much since they last played the Cowboys in the playoffs. So I think everybody's going to play. There's no way Debo Samuel loves the spotlight. He lives in the spotlight. He's a big game player. There's no way he shuts himself. If he played,
he's playing.
If he played at 3:15 against Arizona, or 1:15 for you guys out in the Pacific, but 3:15 for me Central. He's playing at nighttime against Dallas.
Brother Bob says, "PP, should Wilkes blitz Brock more instead of the corner? Be 100."
Should Wilkes blitz Brock more?
So
all right, thanks.
He said, "PP, so you're saying Ayuk is graded higher than Brock Purdy?"
Yeah, believe it or not, unbelievable.
He is.
But I will say this: the Brock Purdy stuff. People who rip on Brock Purdy still. Brock Purdy's tied for 32nd in the NFL, dead last. In guess what category?
None.
No, he is last. Passes thrown in the fourth quarter. He's attempted fewer passes in the fourth quarter than any quarterback in football.
Because they're winning.
Because they're winning. They're winning, and they're putting the game away with their run.
Well done, Krug.
So it's one of those things where, and I asked Kyle about the tendencies and this and that this week because we're getting to that point in the year where I wonder, does a coach know? Do you know your own tendencies when you're 4 weeks in? Some coaches know them to absolutely, every possible angle. Others are focused on going forward and they're not looking back as much. but he said, hey, he gets reams of data and that he's looking for outliers. Anything that they're doing 70% of the time or more, he takes a look at. So I thought that was kind of interesting because as the weeks pile together, this is the kind of game that the 49ers, since they've had some blowout games, probably put 3 or 4 things on film that they're going to capitalize on in this game. And that's what you do when you have a big lead in the fourth quarter. You muddy up the film and you muddy up the tendencies so that you can have big playability down the road in tighter games. Well, this is that anticipated tighter game. So I think we're going to see wrinkles in this game that we have yet to see.
I think you're going to see it from both teams potentially.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think we're going to see it to an extent, but I don't know that they're going to come out in that way. And here's why. I think when you play Dallas, you just want to mitigate risk as much as possible because the thing with Dallas's defense is they prey on 2 things: negative plays and turnovers, right? There's a reason they forced the most turnovers since Dan Quinn has come. And that's where I think it's frustrating sometimes for us to watch, but the 49ers had the perfect plan in the playoffs when they played them at home last year. They understood the fact that they're bigger than Dallas. They're more physical than Dallas. They will outlast Dallas in a just game of hitting and physicality, which they did. And they're just better than Dallas. The only thing Dallas can do for the 49ers to lose to Dallas is if the 49ers create a situation where Micah Parsons makes one insane play, hits Brock Purdy, forced sack fumble. Now they get it, or Trayvon Diggs gets a pick 6, something like that, right? A big, drastic, sudden change in negative play. And so that's where when we talk about, installing plays that could yield the big plays, you have to make sure that, and I think this is where it goes into Shanahan's mindset. If you're playing this tight ball game where you're just a little bit ahead, kicking field goals, do you want to call a play where you're taking a shot play where, hey, your protection to the backside might not be the most sound call, but if you get it right, you can hit a 40-yarder to Ayuk to get him open? Or do you just continue grinding out the game because as long as I don't make that call where something bad could happen and we just stay within the flow, we're just better than this football team? And that's where I think that this game probably plays more to the latter than the former, in the sense that I think they'll elect to play it a little bit more conservative. And I think that's the way to go. I think Dallas is front runners. I think Dallas, when they can get some turnovers, they can get the floodgates. You can feel the speed and the pressure of their defense. That's when they play their best football. You put them in a tight ball game where the margin for error is about execution, it's about physicality, I think Dallas folds. The Niners have put them into that kind of football game 2 times in a row, and they've folded. I don't think they're capable of playing that kind of game. And so why give them the opportunity to do that?
Also, Brock's the wrong kind of quarterback for them. They need a quarterback that's easily flustered, that doesn't have an account of his receivers, doesn't get the ball out fast. Brock's getting the ball out really fast. He's really great when he gets it out in under 2.5 seconds. Right now, he's getting the ball out in the 4th fastest rate in the league. He's also showed discipline in that Giant game just 2 weeks ago when faced with a bunch of exotic blitzes. He throws the ball away and doesn't give you those huge negative plays that Dallas relies upon to have to have those great one-sided victories. But I will say this, the one thing that is a little surprising to me, guys, when I looked into the numbers, is how much in the first month of the year, even with a young quarterback, that Kyle Shanahan has left his offensive line pretty naked. This year, Kittle's got 15 snaps in the first month as a pass blocker, so he's only blocking roughly 3-4 times a game as a pass blocker. Juszczyk only has 4 snaps in pass protection. CMC only has 13. Shanahan's basic mode is get 5 eligibles out in the route, use the entire field, force the defense to defend the entire field, and then put it all on Purdy and let him get the ball out before the rush gets to him. And Purdy's been spectacular at getting it out. But he's not been protecting him with extra protection and this and that. No, he looks at it the other way. I'm putting 5 in the pattern. You're going to have to defend the entire field, and I'll bet on Brock's ability to process and get the ball out faster than your ability to beat my offensive line, regardless of how questionable it may be in certain spots.
Go Go ahead, Jesse. All I was going to say was I 100% agree with that. And I think the last part is the important part. The reason that they don't use mass protections and stuff is the same reason Cincinnati didn't use them for the longest time with Joe Burrow, because then you're taking away the quarterback's greatest skill, which is the ability to process and see multiple things and get to the right spot to throw the football. That's Brock Purdy's skill. When you have a quarterback that can't process, this is why they talk about it with Justin Fields and Zach Wilson. You put them in max protect situations so that they can look at one thing and look at only one or two things. And it's more about their ability to just stand there and you give them enough time to make a physically capable throw. That's their skill set because they're not capable at this point of fully processing. In Purdy's case, his super skill in this particular case is being able to find quickly where to go with the football. And you're mitigating his opportunity to do that if you max protect with him, because there's less options for him to be able to decipher and find the open one. I didn't mean to cut in on your turn there, Jesse.
No, I actually wasn't going to say a whole lot, so you're good to go. The only thing I was going to say is I really agree with your front running comment, and I think that's Dallas's only chance in this game is if they can get ahead. I think they do present a little bit of a unique challenge that the 49ers haven't necessarily had to run into yet. Maybe they could have with Pittsburgh as well if Pittsburgh hadn't gotten down so quickly. But they can get home with 4 and drop 7 versus some of these other teams have to manufacture pressure by blitzing their heads off. So Dallas has that aspect. I just don't think they're physical enough to hang and get that lead, a double-digit lead on the 49ers and force them to play that type of game. So I don't think it's necessarily going to matter.
Unless the Niners make mistakes.
Right, of course, which they haven't really at all.
And
the whole
Purdy
season,
doesn't make a lot of mistakes, but the one thing I'm looking for, guys, is Dallas to show a look pre-snap and to rotate at the snap into a different look, and maybe some robber looks in the middle of the field where they're kind of cheating to try to – because Brock does throw a lot of short intermediate stuff that you can jump, and he likes to throw with anticipation. So he's good at throwing with those anticipatory passes. So how do you potentially upset the rhythm of the quarterback? By rotating late, by giving him one look pre-snap and a different look at the snap. And I would expect that both sides are going to have wrinkles for one another, and I think that's one of Quinn's wrinkles. He's going to try to fool Purdy with some post-snap adjustment or rotation that he's not anticipating.
I'm glad you brought that up, though, real quick, because that's kind of what Arizona took advantage of a little bit. Because with Dallas's defense, there is so much movement and creativity, and Arizona would motion really late. So if you're going to move on defense and they're going to motion, it just causes confusion, and that allowed them to have quite a few busts in the run game and quite a few runs where they just had such an advantage to the numbers side because they it just so happened their movement and Arizona's movement all coincided in creating one big hole for Arizona to run through. And so that's where I think I'm glad you brought that up, because that is going to be the football game. And it'll be interesting to see what elements of Arizona's plan Shanahan uses and then what elements of his own plan he has. And then Dan Quinn's a great defensive coordinator. I'm sure he has adjustments for whatever mistakes happened and what went wrong in Arizona. And he's not going to let Shanahan just copy Arizona's plan and do that to him. So the matchup within the matchup is something else in this one.
49ers daddy says Purdy's better than Brady and will have 8 Super Bowls. He will be the GOAT. Well, if that's the case, I think we're all here for that.
8 Super Bowls. Holy cow. I couldn't
That'd be incredible.
Wow.
Wouldn't that be awesome? By the time it's over, they have 14 and the next best franchise has 7 or whatever. Like, that'd be insane.
Will there be somebody saying, hey, you know what? I'll believe in him when he wins that 9th. Right now, I'm not believing.
I mean, Brady had haters, so I wouldn't be shocked.
Yeah, I think everybody has haters. Matt says 2021 playoffs on the Debo TD. BA smacked Parsons. Yeah, he did.
He did, yeah.
Yes, he did. That was fantastic. Okay, we talked. I mean, we all basically have said, hey, you know, we're picking the 49ers, or at least that's the vibe I'm getting from you. You can clarify if I'm wrong, but I feel like we're all picking the Niners. I know going into the season, when I went through the schedule, I actually had this as a loss for the 49ers, but now that we're into the season, there's just no way. I don't see them losing to Dallas. I actually don't think I'm going to pick against 49ers any game until they prove that they can be beaten. Like, that's kind of where I'm at with the 49ers right now. But that being said, let's go down the path that they do lose this game for whatever reason. Would that change your opinion of this 49er team if they were to lose in prime time at home against the Dallas Cowboys? Larry, I will start with you.
It wouldn't change my opinion. I think Dallas needs this game more. I think the Niners have knocked them out of the playoffs the last 2 years. Dallas has circled this game, highlighted this game. I mean, whatever their best shot is, I would imagine the Niners are going to get it right here. And to me, I have studied Dallas this year, and I watched all 22 of all their games so far. And to me, the one thing that is noticeable is that their defensive line is faster than it was last year. And I see it across the board. Parsons plays faster. Osa, the UCLA kid's playing exceptionally fast. You're not going to see somebody who's 280 pounds move as well as he does. I mean, he's exceptional. DeMarcus Lawrence, Dante Fowler, Dorrance Armstrong, Sam Williams. They just have a ton of speed. Then on that second level, Damone Clark is flying around, absolutely flying. So to me, I see a faster defense than I saw last year. Now, I don't think they're quite as good on the back end because you don't have Diggs. Diggs is a great player. And they're not quite Stephon Gilmore's a smart player, but he's not known for his speed at this point. So, but I think that defensive front, especially Parsons and Osa, those guys look a step and a half faster than what I remember last year in the playoffs, and that's a concern because they might be able to play all kinds of games up front and get some free runners at Brock. And to me, this game is all about staying ahead of the chains, so you don't get into third and very long, and within an arm's distance on the scoreboard. Whoever said it is right. They're Dallas a bully team. Dallas a team that gets a 21-point lead and you look up, it's 35. Oh my God, what happened? So that's what they like to annihilate teams. So I just think that their speed up front is the best that I've seen in the league this year.
What about you, Vish?
Yeah, so the original question, right, was would my opinion change of Dallas? And by the way, Larry, I thought you would give saying Osa's last name the hearty attempt so that I would have reference to what to say, because I also went with Osa earlier in the show. He's an absolute stud, though, so I mean no disrespect, but
Odigizua?
I'm gonna let
Digizua?
Tarico say it a few times for me during the broadcast, and I'm gonna listen because I love the NBC player intros. Just as an aside, so he'll mention it for us during the NBC player intros. But specific to the question, no, my opinion won't change. I think the Niners have established themselves at the top of the league. I wouldn't expect them to have a letdown just because this is a game they're going to get up for. But at the same time, it's understandable when you've had 4 games at the quality that the Niners have had that, hey, sometimes shit just goes wrong in the NFL. I think Larry hit the nail on the head that this game, I think, is more important for Dallas. Now, I think some of it is the narrative gets a little bit like bullshit. Like, I don't believe just because Dallas lost 3 times, they're just going to come in if these 2 teams have to play a 4th time and be like, oh shit, we can't beat the 49ers. Like, no, they're going to come in and be like, we can beat the freaking 49ers. I think people just like that story of painting it as like, oh, this means a lot because of the psychological battle between those 2 teams. I don't know if it's that deep, because at the end of the day, these guys are professionals who are paid to do a job that they're going to do regardless of whether they're like emotionally nervous or those kinds of things. But regardless of that, because that's just a tangent for myself, my opinion of the Niners won't change really if they lose to Dallas, barring something like, completely catastrophic where everything looks unlike we've seen, before. It would have to be something like the best comparison I have for this is in 2013 when Kaepernick threw for 412 against Green Bay week 1. And with Anquan Bolden and Vernon Davis, we thought, holy cow, the Niners have a more explosive offense. Kaepernick has taken some strides this offseason. He's dicing up people with his arm. And then the next week, Sunday night at Seattle was like the rudest shock ever when Seattle just eviscerated that offense, right? Something like that would have to happen for me to change my mind. But if the Niners just lose a close ball game where a couple of things go wrong, but everything more or less looks as similar as we've seen for the first 4 weeks or in the realm of that, no, losing is not changing my opinion of them.
I'm going to push back a little bit on that you don't think that.
I'll be back in 30 seconds. Hold on.
That's fine. Yeah, you're fine.
Ooh.
That you don't think that
Krug had a couple of waters on the way home.
Yeah, that this would play on Dallas's psyche if they lose this game. The Dallas Cowboys have changed a lot the last 2 off seasons because they lost to the San Francisco 49ers. I mean, they're a big reason that Kellen Moore is not here anymore, So I'm not saying that it would just take all the wind out of their sails. They would have zero belief, but I think them winning this game on Sunday would give them the ultimate belief and show that what they did for the second offseason in a row has paid off. If they don't win that game, yeah, they can always say, hey, it was early. We're a better team now. We still think we can beat them. I think it would play with them psychologically a little bit.
I knew you would say this, so I got something for you because I knew you would go here. And I think there's 2 things with it. One, does the psychology really change for Dallas? Because the Niners beat them twice in a row in the playoffs. So even if they beat the Niners, people are going to say, well, they still kicked your ass in the playoffs, and it's still 2-1. They beat you twice. You've only lost once. Second, we saw this exact same example 2 years ago in the 49ers home opener on Sunday night versus Green Bay. Everybody was like, oh, this is needed for Green Bay's psyche. Green Bay needs to win this game, blah, blah, blah. And Green Bay did win that game. Remember, Aaron Rodgers had those one insane throw on the in cut where he layers it over Fred Warner like 30 yards deep to Devontae Adams. And then the other one, they bust the coverage on the slot fade. Well, what happened that year in the playoffs? The Niners went into Green Bay when it was historically cold in Lambeau, and they beat the Packers in the playoffs. So to me, the psyche aspect and all of that just it gets a little bit overblown because the media likes and needs a narrative to talk about. But I think ultimately, like, these teams are coming in, they're preparing as hard as they can. Like, maybe they have a little bit more confidence because they've beaten a team before. But at the end of the day, you still have to play the game. And I don't think anybody's fearing playing the game, whether they win or lose the previous time.
Yeah, I think those are 2 different things, though. One is a pregame confidence. The other is flat out saying that a team can't win or lose, right? Like, a team can still lose or still win. Like, you can be that. This is something that I learned very early on, and my dad always told me, he's like, you don't have to be scared to get your ass whooped. Like, you can be confident going into a fight, but it doesn't mean you're going to win that fight. But I do think that, like, just the pregame swagger would go away a little bit. Maybe that's a good thing for him. I actually, what I thought you were going to go with was the Rams, how the 49ers had dominated them all these times, and then they got into the playoffs and the Rams won. And, either way, again, it doesn't mean that Dallas can't beat the 49ers when the playoffs come around. I do think for them, though, making those wholesale changes this offseason to move on from Kellen Moore, I do think it would be a little deflating to come in and be like, well, it didn't work again. Back to the drawing board. Hopefully we can figure it out before we go to Levi again, which is where we're going to have to go to potentially win this thing. So it might be pretty tough.
I'm sorry. You have to look at the latest super chat, dude.
I didn't see all that. That's pretty good. That's
funny. I'm sorry, Larry.
That is not good.
That is not good.
That is not good. Hey, man, it's a lot of water. Drinking a lot of water.
That's what I said. I said he definitely drank a couple of waters on the way home from Santa Clara.
Oh, yeah. I drank like 4 bottles of water on the way home, and I'm sitting there going, oh, my God. Are you kidding me?
Do you think it matters? Like, do you think the psychology of it comes into play a little bit, Larry, if Dallas were to lose this game? Like, do you think that would weigh on them a little bit if they had to face the 49ers in the playoffs again? Or do you think it means absolutely nothing?
Well, I mean, yeah, I think there's only one team has doubt if they can beat the other. It's not a two-way thing. Niners know they can beat Dallas. Dallas doesn't know that they can beat the Niners. So I would say if Dallas loses this game, where it becomes psychological is if Dallas loses this game big. Now, if Dallas just loses this game 24-21, it's a wild back and forth game and somebody makes a play, okay. But if Dallas gets their doors blown off, they can't stop the Niners' run. The Niners just run it down their throat like Arizona did. I mean, in reality, why would you do anything? Why wouldn't you just take Arizona's game plan? Just run it at Dallas and play action pass off of it to all your weapons. You got explosive playmakers. I think there's like 9 different ways. I think the Niners can win from ahead or from behind. I don't know. I think Dallas has one way to win. They have to take the lead and then get a double-digit lead, a 2-score game, and then cause turnovers and still hold on. I still think the Niners could even win in that situation. Even if the Niners fell behind 14 and then threw a pick and they were down 17, the Niners, I think, still could come back on Dallas. Where Dallas, I don't think can. I think Dallas is not the same team. They're a one running back team. They don't have the explosive playmaking ability they had last year. I just think that they're a team that has to play from. There's fewer ways that Dallas can win. I think it's absolutely. Niners blow their doors off. Heck yeah, they're bringing that back to Levi's if they get there later this year.
So I have a question in regard to that because there's something you said that was very interesting, and I have a question for both of you because I actually disagree with it. I think Dallas is one of those teams that you can't come back on. Once they get going, the way they rush the passer, the way they play on defense, if you can get a team to just drop back, that's when Dan Quinn and that defense says night. And that's not even an indictment on the 49ers offense because I think they're capable of coming back on most people. But I think Dallas's defense is just a bad situation for any quarterback to really be dropping back into and realistically coming back. Larry, you definitely disagree with that.
I disagree. Well, from what I mean, I don't know if they come back from down 21, but I think if the Niners were down,
if you're saying like they're down 7.
No, I'm saying if they're down multiple scores. Let's say they're down 10-14 in the first half. Niners can come back and beat them in the second half.
That's one score, dude. Didn't you say 17-0?
No, I said 10 points to 14 points. That's 2 scores.
No. In your original thing, you said 17.
I know, but even if they're down 17-0, if it was early enough in the game, I think the Niners could come back. The Niners have an ability they have big playability.
Right. Absolutely, they do.
And also, Dallas is the team that's more likely on paper to make mistakes. Mm-hmm. So I think actually one key guy in this game is going to be the punter, who I can't even remember what he looks like anymore because he never punts, Mitch Wishnowski. If he can pin the Cowboys deep, I think the Cowboys are going to have a hard time driving the length of the field and being efficient against this defense. I'd be shocked if they, to me, field position is everything. Don't give Dallas short fields. Don't let them get up 10 points to 14 points on you. If those things don't happen, I think there's no chance Dallas wins. I think Dallas gets a 14-point lead, a 17-point lead in the second half. Yeah, then it's going to be tough.
Fair. Jesse, no thoughts on that?
I mean, I wouldn't prefer that they're down that much. I wouldn't feel good about it, especially because here's what's interesting about the 49ers. They will continue to run if they're down. But if they're down that much, like mid-third quarter on, I would feel very uneasy about that. Very uneasy because now you're playing right into Dallas's hands. Now you are turning strictly into a passing team, and Dallas at that point can really do what they do to everybody and pile on. So I think it depends on where you're down. If you're down early, first quarter, you get down 14-0. Yeah, I think they can come back from that. If they're down 10 to 14 points in the middle of the third quarter, I don't like their chances.
Agreed.
Cryptic says, I got the Niners winning 20-17, but in the chance the Niners lose, I'm excited to see how Purdy responds after a loss. True test of adversity. Yeah, I didn't even really give my opinion on that whole thing. My opinion won't change of the 49ers unless they get beat at their game. If Dallas comes out and shocks me and is the more physical team and kind of just beats the 49ers up and down the field, that would be where I'm like, okay, is 49ers as physical as I thought? Has Dallas really closed that gap? I would start to question. I would be shocked if the 49ers were out physicaled pillar to post in this game. I don't think that will happen. Sure, I could see maybe a path to not winning the game. I think Dallas is a very good team. I don't think the path is a very big one, but that's the only way that I think I would leave this game and go, maybe the 49ers aren't who I thought they were. And I just don't see that happening. So
I like Niners 35-14. Niners are
Whoa.
scoring 30 a game. Niners defense giving up 14 a game. 35-14.
and you do Dallas actually leads the NFL, I believe, in time of possession right now.
Mm-hmm.
They're crushing
do.
that. They lead in the most plays per possession and time of possession overall. And I think that makes things a little bit interesting because, obviously the 49ers would prefer to win time of possession as well. They are a little bit more of a quick strike offense than I think what they've traditionally been, or at least early on, but they still want to win that time of possession. So if Dallas somehow hangs onto the ball for 40 minutes, things get pretty interesting, I think, in a scenario like that.
And that's, I think, the best point right here, because that gets into the crux of why Brian Schottenheimer is the offensive coordinator now. Dallas wants to be able to run the ball. Brian Schottenheimer, the best thing he does is be a run game coordinator. Seattle had a very strong run game for years when he coordinated their run game, and we haven't seen the lasting effects of that offense yet in a truly successful manner for Dallas this year. We've seen issues for them in the red zone against Arizona. They didn't have a particularly disciplined game or clean game against the Giants. And they've been a little up and down, which you wouldn't expect for a quarterback or for an offense that's had such continuity, especially with a veteran quarterback who's been starting for them for a while. And that's where I think we get into this matchup. And Krug, you brought up that run defense concern for so long at the start of this offseason, and it's seemingly gone away. And I think the Niners did a good job eradicating that question a little bit versus Arizona specifically, because I thought Arizona was the one really top above average run game that they've faced in their first 4 games. Well, now we get to see that real test for Dallas with Brian Schottenheimer, with Tony Pollard. Can they run the ball and can they control the ball against the 49ers? Because if they're able to do that, that's a completely new variable to this matchup that we have not considered till now. And I'm glad you went there, because it is good that we discuss it. So in the case that it happens, we can tell everybody yeah, we discussed that one. I told you so. No, but I'm
We
joking.
brought it up.
I'll tell you, there's one other aspect to this that's amazing watching Dallas, and I heard Steve Wilkes say it today, and I'm like, that was my take. I literally had it in my notes after watching Dallas on the All-22. Modern medicine is now so incredible that Tony Pollard tore an ACL in the playoffs. You can't even tell that he ever had any injury.
I thought he broke his ankle.
Was it a broken ankle?
Yeah, because he was one of the hip tackles, right, where Jimmy Ward's hip came down on his ankle.
I thought it was torn ligaments. No,
maybe in his ankle. The way his ankle turned, I think he had the Trey Lance.
It looked bad, and
it was
here. Here we are, the very next year. He doesn't look like a guy who's had any major surgery at all, and maybe he hasn't. Maybe it was just a broken bone. Maybe there weren't ligament damage there, but he just looks like the same guy. Doesn't look at all different. I'm a little fearful of
Fractured fibula.
Okay, so he broke his leg. So we were somewhere in between both of us.
I mean, for a running back, that's kind of a major injury. He looks phenomenal. And the 2 guys that kind of are wild card factors that I'm a little afraid of in this game, Kevontae Turpin and Deuce Vaughn. They're both, Deuce Vaughn can't do it every week, but Deuce Vaughn's really quick. And Kevontae Turpin is very explosive. And, yeah, those guys haven't done it, every single week. but they could have a huge game. There's no question. And to me, Dallas's speed, their speedy weapons, because like to me, going from Dalton Schultz to Jake Ferguson, that's a backslide. I think overall though, not having Zeke and not really having a second back, that's not a good thing for Dallas long term. But man, if they can somehow scheme up, chunk yardage plays to their explosive playmakers who can, I mean, they got a couple guys in Turpin and Vaughn that are just electric. So, that's kind of, to me, my fear is that both those guys have huge plays that lead to points.
Interesting. Brother Bob says, Matt, don't say sorry. PP, did you wash your hands after PP?
I'm not even answering that. So,
Frank Tom
crazy
Ocean
question.
says, PP, since you're working out, ask Lombardi about 75 hard. There you go.
75 hard.
I think it's 75, like 75 days without. There's a whole bunch that goes into it.
You work out. You only drink on weekends. You do this. You do that.
No, I don't have any kind of regimen. I also am not swimming with sharks in the bay like Dave.
Cocoa Puff says, I feel the Niners offense is better than last season. Yes, most definitely. And in fact, that was something that I talked about going into the postseason last year, and I think is starting to really pick up steam, I felt this week, which is I started to see the transition personally where the 49ers were starting to become an offensive team, maybe more so than a defensive team, which is kind of crazy to think about. And I think after Sunday's game, I saw a lot of people starting to talk about that as well. So most certainly.
I mean,
that
it
was
also
your prediction
flies
before the year. I remember that.
It flies right in the face of the biggest idiot take of the offseason, which was that Brock Purdy couldn't get any better. That was the, wishing upon a star take of all time, that a 23-year-old quarterback who cares about getting better wouldn't get
Who
better.
Actually said that he couldn't get any better, though? Hold on.
And also,
is that a real
let's
thing?
be honest.
Lots of people, lots of people in the chats were saying, they're going to catch up with him this year. We're going to see a clear regression. He's not going to be the same. The league's going to catch up with him. They're going to adjust. You just wait and see. It's going to be Trey that. Yeah.
Krug, are you telling me though, even you as one of Brock Purdy's biggest supporters, you expected him to have a 2-month delay on his surgery, have his surgery on March 10th with a 6-month return that we knew the timeline, return 2 weeks before he was supposed to return at the start of training camp, have no setbacks with the injury in physical nor mental, and he's improved his level of play within the offense in that time? Like, are you telling me that all of that was a realistic expectation? Because that's what happened. That's what's happened with Brock Purdy over the last 6 months. And I'm sorry, I had a lot of wrong takes then, and my hindsight on it is that I probably would have had those takes even then, because it's hard for me to imagine this.
There's a big difference between physically getting back and the league's going to catch up. And that's what the talk was. The league's going to catch up to this guy. He was smoke and mirrors. He was gimmicks. He caught people by surprise. I mean, come on. We streamed hundreds of times in the off season, and I must have seen that comment at least 1,000 times, that there was going to be regression from Brock Purdy. Now, if you said that he was, I think we all just had no knowledge of what he would look like elbow-wise. Every comment that I made about Brock Purdy was always contingent on, well, we'll see what he looks like after he starts throwing, right? Because nobody knew what he was going to look like. I mean, I didn't have enough history with that injury to have any idea of what he would, I thought there was a very good chance that he could have some, diminished skills. Diminished skills are diminished skills, but we're talking about regression based on the league seeing him. And there were tons of people who said he's going to regress. And it was asinine, because nobody regresses. Everybody gets better. Everybody gets better. You're better today streaming than you were a year ago. I'm better at it. Why? Because we've done it. And the same way we're better at this, he's better at what he does, just simply by reps.
I like that.
Hold on. And I want to address this too, because to me, these are two very different conversations. First of all, go through my videos and find that for me. I'll be waiting on that one. I got an email. You can send it there. You can DM it to me on Twitter. But saying that a league is going to catch up, or hey, you know what, the league's going to figure you out a little bit, that happens really to everybody. At some point, the league like adjusts to you, and then you've got to adjust back. Like that's football. Like that's everything in football. That's
They quote unquote
an
figured out
offensive
Patrick
play caller.
Mahomes for 3
Right, that's an
weeks.
offensive play caller. That's a defensive play caller. That's Patrick Mahomes. They're like, okay, we're going to go too deep, and it took him a while to kind of figure it out. That is constantly happening throughout the league. That doesn't mean that's different than saying, oh, when the book comes out on him, he's going to suck. That definitely. I mean, go like I said, go find that comment for me. But
and that hasn't happened to Purdy either yet, by the way.
It hasn't. But but the other thing is this though. One thing that I said all offseason was he didn't have the offseason to get better. And Vish, you've had the same exact thing. We've both been very consistent with that. He didn't have the offseason to get better. So he's going to have to improve throughout the season.
I mean, okay. How do you get better? Mental reps, physical reps. He couldn't do any physical reps.
For sure.
But he did tons of mental reps. And I asked him directly in May after minicamp. I said, hey, where are you now in minicamp? This is with the surgery. You hadn't been throwing. Where are you now with this playbook, with this offense, with your maturation as a football player compared to where you were last year at this time? He's like, oh, my God, night and day. Last year at this time, it was a dizzying array of formations and plays, and I could barely remember it all. And I'm literally trying to remember everything about the play as I'm walking to the line of scrimmage to run the play. This year, I know the offense like the back of my hand, the bootleg game, the quick game, all the different things that stem off of every single play. So I'm just saying that.
But that's last year at that time. That was last year before he had played a snap in the NFL. Like those are, I understand what you're saying.
There's going to be vast mental improvement.
When I said it though, people automatically assume that it's coming from a negative spot. I actually said it to kind of protect Brock if it didn't look as good as what people expected, because where did you expect him to have time to rehab and actually get better? Now, what did end up happening is he came back earlier than I think almost anybody thought. I don't think anybody thought day one of training camp he'd be ready to go, or not many people did. So that did give him a few weeks to not only ramp up, but also possibly get better. But I think even the first few weeks of the season, I really think that you saw relatively the same player. Now you're starting to see that upward arc, where last week it's like, okay, now he's done something that he's never done, right? Now you're starting to see that improvement. And so now from this point forward, I think you're going to start to see those micro improvements. But it wasn't meant as a knock. Again, people hear what they want to hear, or maybe they hear it from the person that they don't want to hear it from, and they take it as a slight or a negative. And that's not always the case. When I made that comment, and I know, Vish, when you made that comment,
I wasn't referring to you.
No. No. Hold on. Yeah. I'm not saying you, but I'm saying comments like this. Oh, cough, cough, Jesse. Wait till people automatically go, oh, he's saying he can't get better. I never said that. I said, don't expect him to get much better before week 1 because he didn't have time. He was rehabbing. That's a protection of Brock. That is not a, right. Oh, yeah, Brock sucks, you're supposed to get better and rehab. That's not what that comment was.
Right. And I think there's two things with that. One, I think that the way we're going about it is a little bit wrong. I don't think we should be talking about the people who are wrong about it. We should be more talking about how impressive it is that Brock has come back and it's been this seamless for him. That's not easy. And when you're talking about quarterbacks, well, mental reps, physical reps with lack of reps, we've seen Dak Prescott come back from a serious injury. It wasn't this seamless for him week 1. Brady coming back from his ACL. It wasn't this seamless for him week 1. Manning off of the neck surgery. Wasn't this seamless for him. So this is not like Brock Purdy is seamless even more compared to the rest of the league. And then in terms of the league figuring it out, the league hasn't come up with an answer to this offense yet with Christian McCaffrey. And that's with Brock Purdy playing quarterback, but that's also without Brock Purdy playing quarterback. I don't think that takes away from how Brock Purdy is done at all. Like, he's done exceptionally well. But this idea that he has gone through the adversity of the league having somewhat of an answer to this version of the 49ers, he hasn't had to go through that. Maybe he never goes through that. Maybe the Niners are so good that nobody can find an answer to that. I wouldn't put that out of the realm of possibility with the way they look right now. But I think there is an opportunity, for example, if there is a team, maybe Dallas does that. And maybe Brock passes that test with flying colors. But I will say that I don't think we have seen him go through that yet. And I don't think it's detrimental that he hasn't gone through it yet either. Like, I don't think that takes away from the fact that he's been spectacular to start his career. Spectacular. It's just that, hey, these conversations that people had, I think that they were very valid within the context of which they were being had. I don't know that, hey, like that takes specifically. And Larry, you might have been referring to something completely different there than what Jesse said, but we got onto a tangent on what Jesse said, which in turn came to what I said as well. So therefore, we did have to mention that.
And Janky says Jesse gets mad if you mock Josh Allen, so watch out. I don't get mad. I think it's stupid. Like, when you see a guy perform,
Josh Allen?
When you see, oh, trust me, after week 1, oh God, you would have thought he was awful. It was hilarious. I'm like, when a quarterback proves that they're elite for 3 years in a row and then they have a bad week and you're like, oh yeah, he's not good. I think that's a very bad take. It's a bad way to look at football and say that week to week, a player that's already proven they're great in this league, you can tear them down based off of a bad week. Sure. I mean, if that's the route you want to take, I don't get mad, but I'm definitely going to call it out because I think it's crazy. And especially when I spent all offseason arguing Josh Allen versus Burrow, I would love to hear the other side of that argument now. Nobody's saying that Burrow's better than Josh Allen at this point, but I had to defend that all offseason. So
Josh Allen is a special player. I mean, we're talking about a 6'6" player who plays with almost no fear. But, there was inconsistency at Wyoming, and you're still going to see a little inconsistency. But he's also mercurial, right? I mean, he's a mercurial runner, thrower. I mean, it's just he's not as consistent as some, but he's got higher potential than almost everybody.
He also last year he had a stretch where he turned the ball over a ton, and that's what people refer to. People forget he had a partially torn UCL. So Purdy had a fully torn UCL, needed surgery. He had a partially torn UCL and played through it. And people didn't want to give him any grace for those turnovers. But as soon as Burrow has a boo-boo in his calf, it's like, oh, well, I mean, he is hurt. He's hurt. I say that because you watched Patrick Mahomes with a high ankle sprain go out and beat Joe Burrow to get to a Super Bowl and then go win a Super Bowl when he was clearly hurting. If you're on the field.
No, I agree.
You know what I mean?
Like, we've seen Rodgers go through an entire playoffs with the torn calf. And yeah, he didn't play that well, but yeah.
I watched Phillip Rivers go into a playoff game with the torn ACL.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, that's what happens sometimes. It sucks, right? My point is that you can't hold one quarterback accountable for all those things and then ease off of another one because you like them more and all of a sudden, their injury doesn't matter, or, oh, they're injured, so, they should get all the grace in the world. Like, why does Burrow, what has Burrow done in this league that Allen hasn't other than make it to a Super Bowl?
What we need to do is just remember, I was just going to say, what we just need to do is remember that what happens with the quarterback, the quarterback is the head of the snake, but it's not the entire snake. I mean, you have a defense, you got coaches, you got different philosophies, you have play callers. Some play callers are really great. Some play callers move on, and it changes the dynamic. Sometimes your relationship between a wide receiver and a quarterback erodes over time. Sometimes guys don't work at it. I mean, people talk about sophomore slumps for quarterbacks. Sometimes quarterbacks have some success and they just stop working. They stop watching film. They stop working on their game and they regress. So it's like everybody's wired a little different, but you're right. Burrow's got Jamar Chase, Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins. He's got big-time weapons. So why is he not playing as well? Why are the Bengals suddenly 1-3 and Burrow's coming off a game where he didn't throw a single touchdown? It could be anything. It can be anything from the play caller to the play sequencer to the weapons to the relationships. There's a lot of factors, but it all kind of gets dumped in the quarterback's lap every time, good or bad.
Agreed. By the way, I was a little sad for a second because the Bears were about to win this game, but then I realized by winning this game, hopefully Carolina wins a few too. They don't get Caleb Williams, so now I'm rooting for the Bears to win games.
Well, who
Are you
wouldn't get
that
Caleb
sold?
Williams? Carolina can't. Oh, because I see what you're saying. I got you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Am I that sold?
On Caleb Williams?
Not even. I just don't want all these Bears fans I know to have any sort of hope.
Oh,
Or
you
any
live in the
sort of,
Chicago area. I
yeah,
got
dude.
you. Yeah.
The last thing I need, dude, let's
Such a
just.
hater.
We don't actually know if Caleb Williams is the real deal, but if they got Caleb Williams, you know how insufferable these people will be for the next 6 months before the season starts. You think we had a difficult offseason talking about Brock Purdy and Trey Lance? Let these fans get Caleb Williams, especially these fans who've never had a quarterback. I might have to turn my phone off, man. You'll call me to do a show and I'll just be unavailable because there's too many Bears fans trying to talk.
Oh, it's too funny. I love it. Steve M says 27-14 Niners. Yak and turnovers make the difference. Okay.
Yeah,
I like
agreed. Well said.
I want to say this too. I actually appreciate when people push back in the comments towards me. I get fired up. And I think people might mistake that as oh, he gets mad or whatever. At the core of starting this channel, the channel was started because I love to debate sports. Vish and I have had these conversations a million. How many times have we been in a Twitter space at midnight debating Jared Goff is Eli Manning without the rings? We've had the craziest debates, or Larry Fitzgerald's not a top 10 receiver. These are conversations I just enjoy having. So I get super passionate, especially if I feel I am prepared on the topic. Then it's all right, let's have this debate. I'm ready to go. You give me your counterpoints, I got my counterpoints. So at the crux of it, that's really the heart of this channel, and where it started was the fact that I just love having sports debates. So
yeah, and I can elaborate on that a little bit too, just because your background is a little more similar to mine than Larry, who works professionally in this.
Yeah.
I just get the kick out of I like this stuff. I nerd out about this stuff. And for me, the kick is being able to find people that are passionate enough to talk about it with me. And so that's where if you get people that just agree with you, dude, what are we talking about? We're here to share opinions. We're here to have good-natured, good, nice debates about it. I enjoy the back and forth. I enjoy perspective. I don't always have to agree with it, but I like when people make a few good points. I mean, dude, how much do you and I disagree on that we text each other
all
later and we're you were
all
right about this, you were wrong. But at the time, we do it in a very respectful way, but we're both pretty stubborn that I'm right, Jesse's wrong, and you're I'm right, Vish is wrong. And so I get a complete kick out of it. So I appreciate everybody that disagrees and debates, because that adds to the conversation. Larry,
and people who say that they've never been wrong, that just tells me you haven't done it long enough.
Everybody's wrong.
Long enough.
Either that or your takes aren't out in the ether enough for anybody to call you out for being wrong. That's the other option.
Yeah, or maybe you just erased all your videos that were wrong and moved on.
The thing about there's a tweet going around, and I reposted it, and it was hey, everybody's got an ego and wants to prove when they're right. Retweet this and give us a time you were wrong. I don't know if you guys have seen this floating around. I retweeted it and said, yeah, I thought that the Solomon Thomas and Reuben Foster picks, I gave the 49ers an A. So that was the one that stood out to me, is oh man, I couldn't have been more wrong.
Are you kidding me? That was one of the most happiest times. I thought Reuben Foster was such a stud coming out of Alabama. I thought it was such a steal. I still remember because I was at Cornell at the time, and me and my dad were watching the draft in a hotel in Ithaca. And after they draft Reuben Foster, my dad turns to me and he goes, "This is John Lynch drafting his Warren Sapp and his Derek Brooks." 5 minutes later on the broadcast, Daniel Jeremiah said the same thing. And to this day, my dad's like, how did Daniel get that information from me? He like jokes about it, but it's such a happy memory because we had been through so much of watching shitty football for 2 years. And hiring Shanahan was such a pinnacle, and then drafting those two players, whether they panned out or not. But that was like a Super Bowl win at the time. Like John Lynch fleeced the Bears. Like he traded down for a quarterback they were never going to draft and got this guy from Stanford who they took a class with. And then Reuben Foster was the baddest dude in college football. He was the one guy who knocked Leonard Fournette out of games. Like, dude, like I cannot. It's so funny you bring that up because I was so wrong on that too. But I can't I can't not look fondly on the 2017 draft, even though both of those players didn't work out, because there's so many positive. That was like the start of like something positive when, you know, we didn't have a lot of positive for the 49ers in a few years.
Yeah, most certainly. I do want to circle back because I feel like I would be chicken shit if I didn't. And so I got to say something. I'm not going to say who it is, but if you're talking about who I think you are, Larry, that person deleted their videos because they got demonetized and YouTube wouldn't tell them where it was coming from. And so they deleted everything in hopes to try to get their monetization back. So I'll just throw
yeah, they had to.
I wasn't talking about Ryan, but I was talking about a number of people that I know who have just gone full on. I can't admit when I'm wrong just because I'm going to lose face. And it's like, dude, people don't watch your YouTube channel because you're right all the time. People watch your YouTube channel because you're entertaining, or you're enlightening, or you're fun, or whatever. And it's like, dude, when you're wrong, admit you're wrong. You know, just admit you're wrong. I'm wrong all the time. I thought Carlos Hyde was going to be an awesome Pro Bowler. I thought JJ Stokes.
Don't go there. You're reminding me of wrong takes too.
I thought JJ Stokes was going to be the next Jerry Rice. I mean, I mean, come on. If you do this long enough, you're going to be wrong. That's all.
Dude, I went on the worst one for me is last offseason when I was getting back into the swing of streaming. I was going on with you, and we did a show like before preseason. You go, let's talk running backs, blah, blah, blah. Like, who do you think is the most talented guy? And I was like, dude, I don't know what it is. I don't know why they like him, but I think Trey Sermon is still the most talented back on this team. Blah, 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 blah. Like, I don't know what happens this year, but I think he's the most talented guy. 2 weeks later, the guy gets cut. 2 weeks later, the guy gets cut. And I just went on your show, and I'm like over there just waxing poetically about Trey Sermon. Like, Trey Sermon has never been waxed poetically about. I did it for like 5 minutes about him, and he was cut 2 weeks later. That was tough. That was tough.
I'll go back to your comment, Brother Bob, but I brought this one up because I think it goes in line with kind of what you were talking about, where, you know, everybody can be wrong. Mike says there's plenty of room on the Purdy train. We take late boarders, and I think that's it. You know, when it comes to Brock Purdy, like, I know specifically, Larry, you were not a fan of his coming out of college. Once you saw him in person, you fell in love very quickly, right? And you were able to dissect it and say, hey, I think this kid's going to be really good. And you were right about that. I was the opposite, where I liked him a ton coming out of college. And then when he got to the league, I was like, yeah, you know, but I like Trey more, you know? And so that was the conversation. And then personally, I loved having the conversation all off season and for many seasons. It definitely put a lot of views on everybody's channels when you talked about Trey. But to me, I know I personally felt it. And I think the fan base, for the most part, took a collective sigh of relief when it was over. It was like, okay, we can all just like root for Brock Purdy and see where it takes us. Maybe he's great. Maybe he's not. Time's going to tell. But we can just focus on being fans of the team again without all the extra BS. So I agree with this comment here. Brother Bob says, PP, you're so in love. You say his full name often. True love.
But do we ever? That's all of us, though. I feel like none of us call him Brock. None of us call him Purdy. We call him Brock.
It's always
Purdy.
Brock Purdy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It rhymes with turdy.
Yeah. That was
like, what are we going to do?
Weird
Call him
thing
Purdy?
to say. Yeah. No, I think I think about it. I think I do call him Brock Purdy. Every time I say it, it's always Brock Purdy for the most part. I agree.
Yeah, well, no, poor PP is the one that's like, oh, PP, you love him too much because you say Brock Purdy, but that's us too.
Matt says, Larry, why can't you have doubts? We have Jimmy PTSD.
Go for it. But that just say to yourself, you've got a limited scope, limited focus. Because almost everybody who didn't want to believe in Brock Purdy brought up Jimmy Garoppolo this offseason. And that just screams out, I haven't seen enough football. So just know, it's like you're a movie critic that's seen 2 movies. It's like, okay, maybe you shouldn't be so heavy-handed in your criticism if you've only seen 2 movies. Maybe you should wait till you see, I don't know, 5 to 10 movies. It's the same kind of thing. I think the one common denominator that almost everybody who didn't believe in Brock Purdy, they couldn't say it without bringing up Garoppolo. I mean, it's like, come on, your focus is your scope's got to be wider than that. Garoppolo got worse because Garoppolo doesn't love football. He doesn't love the process of football. He doesn't work at getting better. So he just kind of plateaus. That's a big part of football. I talked to Isaiah Oliver about that today. There's lots of guys in the league that are good enough to make it to the league, but they don't love the process of football. The process of football is what happens between, Monday after the Sunday to the following game day. That's the process. Brock Purdy loves the process of football, and you can see it. Jimmy Garoppolo didn't love the process of football. He was dying to get out of there. Kaepernick didn't love the process of football. He wanted to be a part-time this and a part-time that. You got to be all in on being a football player. And you got to be wed to the process of football as the quarterback. You got to spend the 100-hour weeks. You got to look at all the protections. You got to be almost like a coach. It's like there's 2 standards. There's 2 work hours. There's the one for the team and then the one for the quarterback and the coaches. The quarterback and the coaches work tons more. And if you want to work like the rest of the team, then you're probably not going to improve as a quarterback. And I think that's what happened with Jimmy Garoppolo. And that's why he's plateaued. He hasn't gotten better. The league's adjusted to him, and he's gotten worse.
So
he doesn't have any downfield passing game. He doesn't throw outside the numbers. I mean, he's got tendencies. I mean, Greg Cosell, who watches film, we used to visit with us all the time. He'd be like, he's not a great late in the down thrower. Jimmy likes to throw it in the middle of the field late in the down. It's like if the guy from ESPN and NFL Films can pick that out, well, guess what? Defensive coordinators can really pick it out. And then you saw it in the All-22. Go back to the Chief game last year where the Chiefs late in the down cheated in the middle of the field and up. And basically Garoppolo throwing picks and turnovers because he's throwing it right in the middle of the field late. So it's just guys plateau. If you stop working at it, it's an adjustment period. You adjust to them, they adjust to you, you adjust back, that kind of thing. If you stop working, you stop making those adjustments, you don't get better. But you can't, just because Garoppolo regressed, your scope's got to be broader than that. And that's what almost all of the people that question Purdy would cite Garoppolo. And I get it, I understood, but you got to have a wider scope, that's all.
I don't want to speak for Matt, but I think that what he's trying to say is not exactly what he said here. The interpretation I gather, and again, if I'm completely wrong, then I'm just going to speak for myself. So let's take his comment and then I'll speak for myself. But this is what I think he's trying to say, is that I think there's 2 things important here. I think you can acknowledge, one, that Brock Purdy has performed exceptionally well over 11 games without anointing him or giving a definitive claim on him being this or that. I don't think we have enough of a sample size to give a definitive claim, although the 11 games have been exceptional, which make us think that over a larger sample size, he's going to continue playing this way. And then the other thing is, I think just because you don't give a definitive claim, or I think a lot of people view that, okay, if you're not ready to anoint Purdy, that means you somehow doubt him or you're waiting for him to fail. And I don't think that both of those things are necessarily true. I think it's very easy to acknowledge Purdy has been excellent. I think Purdy is going to continue to be excellent. I think Purdy has an opportunity to continue to be excellent for a long time, but I can't tell you he's top 5. I can't tell you he's a franchise quarterback just because for me, the sample size is low to go there. I'm not telling you he's not those things because I'm expecting him to fall off. I'm just telling you he's not those things yet for me, or I'm not ready to say those things about him because I want to see the sample size increase. And I think those are two very different things from simply saying, oh, Purdy sucks, or I think Purdy is not going to be good. I think there is that conversation, and that exists. And then there's also people, and I myself fall into this. I think Purdy has been phenomenal, actually, for the most part this year. I think Purdy, when you take a look at his sample size, his status, and everything, has been exceptional for 11 games. But I also would like to see him start an entire year before I start making definitive claims on who and what I think he is. And that has nothing to do with how good I think he's been and how good I think he's going to continue to be. It's just the reality of a smaller sample size in the NFL. Same thing going on with CJ Stroud. I think CJ Stroud is playing unbelievable football right now. For a rookie, he looks like he can be a star, but I don't say he is a star. I say looks like he's going to be a star because I need to see some level of consistency from him doing that with the smaller sample size, even though through 4 games it looks really, really good, just as through 11 games with Brock Purdy, it looks unbelievable.
I couldn't have said it better myself. And it's not just, I think it all comes down to how you look at or evaluate quarterbacks. I agree with you, Vish, that when you don't fully bend the knee to Brock Purdy's whatever, then it's automatically taken as a negative. And it's just like, hey, I just want to see more. I'm not saying he's been bad or that he's going to be bad, but let me see more. We had Jalen Hurts last year. We'll take it away from Brock Purdy. We had Jalen Hurts last year played at an MVP level and arguably outplayed Patrick Mahomes for a big chunk of the Super Bowl on the biggest stage. And as great as he looked, I still said, hey, looked awesome. We've obviously seen him ascend. But before I just start saying he's a top 7 guy in this league bona fide, I need to see another year. Trevor Lawrence had a very, very good second year. Said the same thing about him. Now, I also, by the way, thought that Trevor Lawrence coming out of the draft would be a stud. So it would be easy for me to say, okay, I thought he would be a stud. He's now shown me he's a stud. He's a stud. But instead I'm saying, hey, let me just watch it again to make sure. Did the same thing with Zach Wilson. I didn't think he would be good. He's shown me he's not good. And I still said, you know what? Give me a third year before I completely write him all the way off. That's just me. That's me trying to learn from my past mistakes where I did make a sweeping judgment on a player or a quarterback in the past when I was younger and would say, oh, I've seen it for X amount of games, so this quarterback's good or this quarterback's bad. And instead, I've tried to change that conversation and say, hey, this quarterback's playing good or this quarterback's playing bad. I don't know ultimately what they will be long term. I need to see years before I'm willing to go all the way in one way or another. That's just the way that I approach it.
Right. And by the way, even if it doesn't work out long term to Brock Purdy, it doesn't mean that these 11 games have not been exceptional.
Exactly.
And that's what I feel like we can't just we try to take an oversight view of these guys' career when their career is ongoing and variables are constantly changing. And we're commenting about him in the now. And through 11 games, him in the now has been excellent. And we're saying he's been excellent. But that doesn't mean I need to tell you that him 5 years from now is excellent too, especially when I only have 11 games of him being excellent, even though it's been 11 excellent games.
Guys get good, guys get bad. I mean, and you can't use 3 years as the barometer. Alex Smith wasn't good until his 8th year.
True.
Vinny Testaverde wasn't any good until he was 31. Kurt Warner wasn't even in the league until he was 27. He's in the Hall of Fame. And guys can get good and then can get bad. I mean, it's Carson Wentz got good. Now he's bad.
I use 3 years of playing as a barometer, and you're right. It's not a perfect situation, but 3 years of sitting versus 3 years of playing are very different. You look at a quarterback in Seattle, Geno Smith. Geno Smith's a really good example of it. When I say 3 years on the surface, well, it's like, well, he didn't really pop till year 8, but really he popped in year 3 of playing. He played year 1, he played year 2, then he had a stint where he sat for like 6 years or whatever it was, and then he finally played for a third season, and in that third season of playing, he popped. It's not a perfect formula by any means. There is nothing out there that is ever going to be a perfect formula unless you just say, hey, you know what? I'm going to wait till the end of every career before I make any sort of judgment on anybody. All you can do is say, in this moment, this player is this. And that's why I've tried to change my conversation around Brock Purdy to, instead of worrying about what he is 2 years from now, which is what I was doing, was like, listen, I don't, can he do it without CMC? Is he worth paying in 2 years? That's where my mind was going with the conversation. Do we have a franchise guy? I want a franchise guy. Instead, I'm like, hey, you know what? Let's just enjoy this. Let's call it for what it is right now. Instead of forecasting what it's going to be or worrying about those things, let's take it like a power ranking situation. And if I'm making a quarterback power rankings, which really is a week-to-week assessment of a player that I don't have enough data on to know that he is or isn't that guy long-term, I will say in a power ranking, he's playing like a top 3 quarterback right now. Now, I'm not going to call him a top 3 quarterback. I don't know. I don't have enough data to say that that's who he's always going to be. But right now, he's absolutely playing that way. And I'm not going to not give him credit for that, because maybe he does it a little bit differently than the way I prefer. I prefer the big arm, runs fast, has every intangible in the book, and is smart. I prefer the perfect prototype. Brock Purdy's not those things. But instead of holding that against him, I'm just going to enjoy the moment and then look at him week to week and assess him based off of what I'm seeing. And so far, every single game he's played phenomenal. And I'm going to continue to say that as long as he does that. And when he doesn't, I'm not going to pile on him and be like, yeah, see, this is what I was waiting for, because I'm not waiting for the bottom to fall out. I'm not going to celebrate that. I'm just going to say, hey, you know what? He's young. It's a hiccup. He'll be back next week. And that's where I'm at with it.
And I'm glad you're going there and as well, because I think there's a little bit of confusion in the comments. You're not saying that you're not going to form an opinion on a quarterback until year 3, but you're saying that you're not going to be definitive on that opinion until you can have a large enough sample size to be comfortable with being definitive. There's a difference. It's not that you're going to not acknowledge Purdy playing well until he hits 3 years. You're acknowledging it every day that he continues to play excellent. What you're not going to do is come here and say, I've seen 11 games, he's a franchise quarterback. Because to me, part of being a franchise quarterback, Jesse, part of that job description is 4 years, 5 years in a row. You're the starter for that franchise. Year in and year out. You start multiple years in the NFL in a row. That's not an easy thing to do in the NFL, especially a quarterback. There's so much turnover at the position. Being able to play well for multiple years, continue to keep your job and be a starter, it's not easy to do what Kirk Cousins has been doing or Dak's been doing. Yeah, they're not the best quarterbacks, but not many people in the NFL hold a job for that period of time, especially a job requiring that much competition. I mean, shoot, we all thought Kyler Murray was it, right? 3 years. He was in the MVP conversation that third year. They were 10-0 for a while, all of it. And look at what's happened with his career. Would anybody call him a franchise quarterback today with his injury and his contract? And so that's where, when we talk about, okay, do we want to say Purdy is definitively a top 5 quarterback? How am I supposed to compare Brock Purdy and Matthew Stafford? Matthew Stafford has started for 10 straight years in the NFL. Matthew Stafford has started year in and year out with multiple coaches, multiple systems. And I'm supposed to compare that with 11 games of Brock Purdy, where Brock Purdy has achieved things in a smaller sample size that other quarterbacks haven't achieved, but then he's also achieved things in a bigger sample size that Brock Purdy hasn't had the opportunity to receive. And that's where I think comparing them and ranking them and being definitive that this person is this player, this person is that, is where it is very, very difficult to say. But surely we're evaluating it ongoing, and you would be stupid to pretend like what we have seen from Brock Purdy over the last 11 games hasn't been excellent in it. Some capacity, whatever goalposts you want to move to create whatever situation you want to do. There's nonetheless, this has been extremely impressive by Brock Purdy for sure.
Yeah, and if you ask my opinion, I will give you my opinion. And I'll say, hey, I don't know for sure, but if you want my I've given my definitive opinion on Brock, and there's a chance I'm going to be so freaking wrong about that opinion. I've always said the same thing. Right now, Brock is playing very good football. Very good football. And every game that passes, by the way, I start to think like that opinion that I had of where he's going to be 3 years in this league is probably going to be really, really wrong. But I gave my opinion. I'm never afraid to give my opinion. Back when I was asked, do you think he can be a franchise quarterback? Well, to me, a franchise quarterback is, hey, you're a bona fide top 10 guy. You can make your $40-50 million a year. You start stripping away talent. You can be the guy. That to me is how I label a franchise quarterback. In my opinion, was no, I don't believe Brock will be that guy. But what I didn't say is he 100% won't be that guy. It's impossible. I didn't say that. Now, that opinion might end up being so wrong. And when it is, I'll gladly say, you know what, dude, I was so wrong about Brock. I didn't have it figured out at all. But what I also haven't done is come in any post game at any time and say Brock Purdy's not good now, or he's not playing good now, or I think mentally he can't handle a big moment. No, I've said the opposite. I saw him in college. I did like him a lot in college. And the reason I liked him a lot in college is because of the mental aspect. And so I don't think he's going to fold. And that's always been my opinion of Brock. I just think there's some physical limitations. Those physical limitations, each and every time he plays, are not that big of a deal, apparently. So as long as he continues to do it long term, I might be way wrong. We'll see.
He looks well on his way to being one. I'll say that. I just can't.
For sure. That's what I'm saying. Every single time he plays, it looks more and more like I'm going to be wrong. And we'll find out. We're going to know in 2 years. That's the great thing about football. We're going to find out. We will have all the answers.
We'll hold you accountable. Don't worry, Jesse.
For sure.
If accountability is what you were looking for, we got you.
We don't know. I mean, there's no law that says we are going to know in 2 years. You know,
True.
Alex Smith came into the
that.
league in 2005. He was not good going into 2011. And then he went 13-3. And then the 49ers became a really good team, and he won the comeback player of the year. Then suddenly he's an 11-game winner a couple years later. Then he's 11-5 in Kansas City, 11-4. Looks like he's going to win the Super Bowl. Alex Smith
6-2 in Washington before he snaps his leg.
Alex Smith, was better from 27 to 32 than he was. And Steve Young was better from in his 30s than he was in his 20s. So just, everybody's a little different.
Listen, Larry, there's outliers, but give me the opposite, because that's what we're saying here. Brock Purdy has played excellent thus far. Have we seen somebody play excellent for 3 seasons in a row and then just completely turn into a pumpkin? Has that happened? Maybe it has.
Rick Meyer was the rookie of the year in the AFC. His first year, I think he had maybe a good second year. I think then he went like 3 years in a row, was one of the most sacked players and lost his confidence. And Jim Everett was damn good early and then started seeing ghosts. What it really comes down to, I think, and old scout said this to me one time, that as soon as every quarterback comes in the league, there's a race. And the race is, can you learn what to do before your body gets so beaten up that you're physically diminished? Or you're mentally seeing ghosts. And I really believe in that. So it's like that's why it's important that Bill Walsh protected Joe Montana early on, and like Zach Wilson right now, I think you can see it. He's losing confidence. I think Sam Darnold lost confidence before he really learned what to do. So now he's like trying to rebuild everything. He's not old. He's only been in the league. He's 25. Alex Smith, separated shoulder. Rocky Bernard bounced on him. He had a bunch of injuries. He had a bunch of games where he just wasn't very good. And then suddenly,
Mike Nolan questioned his toughness.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden, our Harbaugh showed up. The talent improved. He never won the Super Bowl, and you could argue he was always a flawed quarterback, but he got close. He looked like he was getting close, at least with Kansas City. So it's just all the there's a lot of career paths here. There's a lot of options. There's a lot of ways to go about it. Aaron Rodgers sat for 4 years, and then the first year he came out, he was 6-10. Now you could say Aaron Rodgers is one of the handful of the best quarterbacks that ever played the game. So,
by the way, Jesse, also in response to you, when you said what quarterback has looked good for 3 years and turned into a pumpkin, we're seeing a pumpkin right now in Cleveland. That was good for 3 years.
Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, but that was Again, those are major crazy
Yeah.
circumstances. I guess if Brock Purdy turns into a guy that loves massage therapy, then we might have to get concerned.
No. I mean, I just had to be a smart aleck when you
No,
said
but
when you
you're
named
right
one
about that.
guy, and I had to be like, oh, there's the
Listen.
one guy.
You're
Yeah.
absolutely right. I'm sure there's an outlier every which way. I also
And
want to say this.
the other guy is the one in Denver right now.
Yeah, but he's also older, right? Like he's had a good
True.
career. Like that's
But
falling
Cinderella
off.
turned on midnight on him a couple
For
years
sure,
ago.
for sure.
Yeah.
But that could be, age and who knows. But once you're up like in the mid 30s, like it could happen at any time. Not everybody's Tom Brady. Tom Brady's changed the opinion of how long
Okay, yeah,
quarterbacks
that's
can play
fair.
now. And
I've heard Nick Wright give that take. That's his rare great take.
is it great? I also want to say this, and I haven't been paying attention to the actual chat, but you said something about not being willing to give opinions or whatever. Like, think about it like this. If I was afraid to give opinions, don't you think I would have just taken the easy route? For 3 years or 2.5 years leading up to Brock Purdy being drafted, I sang his praises. I've got tons of receipts saying, oh, I think Brock Purdy's a 3rd-round pick. Oh, I think the 49ers should get Brock Purdy. Oh, and then he gets drafted. I'm celebrating Brock Purdy. I've got all those receipts. Don't you think
you have
the
receipts
path?
on every quarterback ever?
Yeah, I do. But don't you think the path of least resistance would be as soon as he came in and played immediately well to be like, I called it. Everybody. I've been saying it for years and I'm sticking with it. And I told you, and I was right. That would be the path of least resistance. That would be somebody who's not willing to have an opinion.
That's not your personality.
It's not. But also, I just want to say, like, that would be the easy route. But because I do have an opinion and I'm willing to stand on that opinion, I took the opposite route and said, yeah, I did like Brock Purdy coming out of college. I still like Trey Moore. Like that was not the easy thing to do. Trust me, that was not the easy thing to do. And I did it and I stood by it. So I'm not afraid to have an opinion.
The sad thing about the Purdy comparison is just that we live in a world where we judge people by the way they look. And that's the way it is. And you can say, oh, I don't. Yeah, you're bullshit. You do. And that's the truth. And if Brock Purdy was 6'6", broad shoulders, and had the physical profile that we associate with like Josh Allen, more people would have been on his deal. But because he's 6'1", he's kind of narrow shoulders, he doesn't quite look the part. It's like, you know what? I don't believe. So it's just like people judge the book by the cover, and his cover didn't look like. I mean, we do it. I mean, we work in YouTube, for crying out loud. We put together thumbnails. People judge whether they want to join a show based on these thumbnails.
Yeah,
when my wife and I go on Netflix,
jersey there.
When me and my wife go on Netflix, we want to watch a movie on a Friday night. Do you think I sit there and read about every freaking movie? No, I judge the thumbnail. That looks terrible, honey. Go to the next one. That looks terrible. That's a chick flick. I don't want that. No. And we're judging the thumbnail. So we are in a world where we judge the book by the cover, and that's it. And everybody judged Purdy because he didn't look the part, and now he's doing it. And there's still some people who don't want to give him his and think that they're not seeing, or they're thinking that he's going to turn into a pumpkin at midnight or whatever. That's great. I mean, that's what makes the world go around. We just debate. We mentioned this an hour ago or 40 minutes ago that, that's the beauty of sports. Like, we get together with our buddies and somebody says something stupid and we go back and forth and we hold each other accountable, and it's just sports. It's life. Heck, you know what? At the end of the day, I'm sitting here with you guys because I love talking to people and I love sports. And hopefully you guys are sitting here for the same reason. And most of the people who are watching for the same reason. They love dialogue. They love that kind of back and forth, and they love sports. So, you know what? Nobody died. I still think to this day, Trey Lance is going to be good. And I know people who think I'm crazy for having that opinion. But I do. So we'll see. We'll see what the future holds. Who knows?
Dude, I mean, I hope that we like streaming with each other. We come on here for like 2 hours and 20 minutes every Thursday, and then we sit in the stream after and talk to each other for like an hour and 30 minutes. So if we really don't like each other when we do this, then we got some
Then it's
major
bad,
issues
yeah.
because we spend a lot of time together on Thursdays.
There are people that I do know who stream who act like they don't like they act like they don't like the people in the chat. I mean, literally. And I'm sitting there going, what? And I never really called them out publicly on it, but it's like, dude, you don't seem like you like the people that we're chatting with. So it's like, do you want to meet these people? Do you want to talk to them? Or do you have disdain for them? I want to talk to them because I think I've done enough radio shows to know that usually the most genius comments don't come from guests. They come from callers. Because
Very
the callers the callers aren't answering to anybody, so it's like an unfiltered take. So I'd much rather, the best takes are almost always from somebody who's unfiltered, not from somebody who's like saying something for effect or because they're going to be staring face to face at a player Thursday at lunch or something. And it's like, he may watch this and I need to be aligned in a certain way. I can't have stank eye in the locker room. You know, there's a lot of people in the media that will do everything predicated on least path of least resistance in their little individual world.
Well said.
Ooh, that's twice in the last 5 minutes by two different people. We've said path of least resistance. That's impressive.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna fire through these super chats because I got my dog staring at me, needing to go to the bathroom, and we don't need any accidents in the house. So
Master,
let's get going.
take me.
Show the dog a video of what our good friend Krug did in the middle of our show.
Yeah, exactly. Great.
Dude,
All right,
don't feel bad because at 1 o'clock in the morning last week, out of nowhere, my dog just comes up to me. What? You just went for a walk. Take that dog for a walk. We walk all around the area, blocks. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm walking around. People think I'm casing homes. And then and all of a sudden we get back to the house. She's in the house for like 1 minute. What? I'm like losing my S downstairs. And she had some kind of issue. I don't know. She had to go again. So I made literally 2 walks, both of them after 1 a.m.
Awesome.
You sound
12,
like you haven't
yeah.
gotten over that.
He's not
stand
over
that dog.
All right, let me fire through these. Brother Bob says PPB 100%. Would you take Montana or Brock Purdy? I love how he puts Brock Purdy full name in capital. He's taking Montana. Stop it.
Come on.
Matt says have 0 followers and you can never be wrong. Now Larry's saying you can be wrong. I think that probably came throughout. This super chat was forever ago at this point, but I think Larry is saying that you can be wrong. You definitely can be wrong, but
only because I've been keeping like a track of the chat and I've kind of just been seeing it as we go through. I think he sent that particular chat when we were talking about how it's very okay to give a take, and Krug was talking about how like nobody cares or listens to anybody because they're right or wrong, because nobody's right all the time. They're listening to your process of why you say what you say.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So, okay, I got you. Brother Bob says, PP, you got into fights with Sanchez, Ryan, and Coach. Him and Coach
I don't never met Sanchez, and I've never gotten into a fight with Coach. Coach just went on the live stream last week. I said I have Purdy ranked 8th best. I said, where do you have him ranked? He said 15 to 19. I asked the wild question of, well, who do you have him ranked in front of that I don't? And he said Ryan Tannehill. And then I said, Ryan Tannehill? Ryan Tannehill? Like that. And then he said, hey, man, you're putting me on the spot. I felt bad because what happened was the coach didn't have like what we have. Like we have our computers in front of us right now. Coach had a power outage in his building. He was operating on the stream off of his phone. So he felt like I kind of like was asking him to give him a list of names, and he was flying blind. So anyway, we talked about it after the show. We'll be streaming Saturday, and I love the coach.
At your usual Saturday morning slot.
Yeah.
That's right.
Cocoa Puff says, I love to see some fans and media keep doubt about Brock Purdy. Yeah, I think he probably loves to see it too. Listen, when quarterbacks end up being really good, or just athletes in general, they always find a way to be slighted. So make his job easy.
I
Brother
asked
Bob
Nick,
says,
I asked Nick
yeah,
Keld today about that, Jesse. I said, I go, you got, because he lives with Purdy.
He's the
I said,
roommate. Okay.
I go,
Yeah.
you guys hear all this criticism, and you hear the people who doubt Brock, right? You're hearing that. And he's like, yeah, absolutely. We hear it all. He's like, he goes, I go, how much of that do you think bothers Brock? He's like, no, it doesn't bother him at all. He claims. So we'll see. I don't know.
I
it
agree
doesn't
with
bother
that.
him, but he uses it for fuel, though.
I'm sure
But
he
I
does.
think Brock's special skill as a human being, and we saw it play out over the course of this offseason, and we see it in essence of him as a quarterback, is he has an amazing ability to compartmentalize and live in the moment. And that's not easy for any human beings. I mean, shoot, in this show, we all just talked about how we've lived in the future, we live in the past. Like, it's very difficult to just take the moment for what it is and focus on what it is. And he plays quarterback very much like that because he executes the play exactly what's needed for that particular play without getting worried about the game score to try and force himself to make a play or get conservative because they're winning and not wanting to make a mistake. He just does what that play merits. And we saw that, I think, through the entire course of this offseason with how he was able to handle the elbow recovery and all that. He was in the moment in every single one of those spots without thinking about what was going to happen in the season and all of that. And so I think that we're seeing that that's what his special ability is. And that's part of that intangible is why I think there's so much belief in him and he's the real deal for some after 11 games.
Brother Bob says, Vish, stop making sense. You must anoint Brock Purdy now. And then he says, Jesse, anoint him now. Brother Bob then says,
he's mad
PP,
at you too now?
Yeah, PP, you mean like DB judges when all right. Listen, I don't even want to talk about that guy over here. It's a weirdo. Steve M says, Jess, I love the QB talk, but Alice, he calls Dallas Alice. It's Alice week. Focus up, bro.
Oh, it is Alice. I thought he was saying, I don't know why.
Alas,
I read
yeah, no.
words. I read alas, it's Dallas week.
He always does Dallas without the D. It's funny. And I would have read it. I would have read it alas as well if I didn't know that. Dazza says, Krug, what do you want doubters right now to say about Purdy?
Just say I have doubts that he's going to be as good as he appears to be right now. If he is, I'm wrong because I don't believe in the present. I'm wrong, but I think I'll be right in the future. Say something like that. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, if you really doubt, like there have been people that have, literally this week after 20 of 21 are like, hey, you know what? I give up. I think he's pretty good. So you know what? And that's just life, right? He's going to win some people over when he beats Dallas. He's going to win some people over when he completes 95%. He's going to win some people over when he, comes back on the road. He's going to, so everybody's got their own measuring stick.
Can I push back on that though? Because that really pisses me off. And it's not what you said, but it's when people do that. Like, I think we do enough pontificating over the course of the offseason. We all give enough takes. We all give enough projections. Why? Because the games are not going on then. One of my biggest pet peeves with anybody who reports on sports in general is their ability to not let go of offseason opinions when the games have started and we're seeing that shit happen on the field. Like, they're too stuck in, well, I said this on June 19th. So therefore, even though these 5 things are happening during the games, I have to talk about these 5 things in a way to not make myself look like an idiot in June 18th. You said that June 18th. Who cares? The games are happening right now. Let's talk about what's actually happening on the field. I don't think it really matters. Okay, you were wrong on June 18th. Who the hell really cares if you were wrong on June 18th? I think that you have less integrity if you go about trying to justify a previous narrative because something different is happening on the field than if you just say, okay, I said that then. Now we're looking at what's happening on the field. And sure, I've had, let's take Purdy, for example. I had my doubts on June 18th. Well, we've seen him play 4 games, and he's been awesome through 4 games. You don't have to say he's going to be awesome. You don't have to say he will be awesome 3 years from now. You don't have to say he was awesome and I was wrong on June 18th. You can just talk about for what he's doing right now. And I'm not talking about either of you. I don't think either of you do that. And I enjoy streaming with you because of it. But it's one of my biggest pet peeves as a fan that consumes sports media. Like, I don't care what you said on June 18th or trying to justify that. I want to talk about what's happening right now. And we all can watch the games and it's time to let go of whatever preconceived notion you had and just talk about
Vish,
what's going on.
how old are you?
23.
Jesse, how old are you?
40.
40. Okay, so I'm 53. I'm the
Well,
oldest
okay,
guy.
I was going to ask you.
I'm the oldest guy in the room. And Jesse can Jesse knows this, and Vish, someday you'll know this. Sometimes, especially listen to the old wise sage in the room. Sometimes it's good to just say, "I'm sorry, I was wrong."
Mm-hmm.
It works for me. I've been married for 20 something years. Hey, honey, guess what? I'm sorry, I was wrong. And it works on this live stream as well, in any live stream. And it works with your audience. Hey, guys, I try to be right. I take pride in being right. I want to be right. If I could be right every time, I would be. But I'm sorry. I was wrong. Believe me, I think I always respect people way more when they can cross those two bridges and say, hey, man, I blew it, man. I'd rather – I've had buddies who were like that. Hey, I'm sorry, man. I was wrong. Just it's a great lesson. Anyway, there you go.
I agree with that. I think in life that makes sense. I don't think you need to apologize for having a wrong sport take, though.
No. But I mean, I threw the I'm sorry more for the if you're getting married. If you're getting married, sometimes you got to say, hey, honey, I'm sorry.
Larry was projecting ahead to my marriage.
Right.
Hopefully within the next 7 to 8 years, and he wanted to ensure that Vish would stay married for a long time. He's looking out for me. Yeah.
I think what happens though, and just know, I mean, we've all been on this other side of it, and everybody handles things differently. I think a lot of people get worried about or frustrated with the gotcha, because you can't, especially being on this side, and you just have to learn to deal with it, right? And it definitely can be hard, I think, at times. But when you do have opinions, and especially if you have strong opinions, people can't wait for you to be wrong. Like they're bookmarking your tweet.
Yeah,
they're saving your tweet. They're saving your whatever thought you had that you thought was a throwaway thought on June 18th, but they didn't think it was a throwaway thought. They're like, oh no, we're holding him to every standard. And so when you are wrong, you've got that group of people that are willing to retweet your stuff and say something like, how's this working out for you now? What do you think about it now? Or whatever, you know what I mean? So I think people get afraid and gun shy sometimes to have real opinions, or quote unquote backtrack off those opinions and say they were wrong because they feel like the mob's coming for them. You know what I mean? So I understand it.
I get that to an extent, but then the way I see it too is like, shoot, we're all talking about football. And if the take is really that personal to you, then I don't know that you care that much about football, because anybody who loves football, loves talking about football, like they know that you're wrong on 98% of this. And like for me, a lot of this is like, shoot, these are conversations that I used to have with my buddies in like elementary school. Like Jesse, what you were talking about, like me and my buddy Blake did a show because like, shoot, we used to talk about sports at school all the time in this capacity. And now all of a sudden we were able to do it on a show with each other. And it's like, of course you give each other crap when you say one thing and it doesn't turn out to be right. But if you really just like football, I don't think it's that personal if you're right or wrong, because your take isn't that personal to you. You're just talking about a sport you enjoy.
Absolutely. Frank Tom Ocean says, I appreciate all content creators' hard work. Thanks. Well, we appreciate you, Frank Tom Ocean, for supporting our hard work. Thank you.
I do too, because it is a lot of hard work. It is a lot of hard work. So, and I've said that to a few different people who have been really, really critical of some people they don't like. It's like, dude, criticize their content or disagree with their point of view, but don't criticize them, because at the end of the day, it's very difficult to put yourself out there. It's very difficult to start your own channel and have the conviction and do all the work and everything that goes into it. I respect the people who do this grind. I really do. And that's why, if you notice my channel, I do more streaming with streamers than I do with media people. And everybody who knows me, I've been in the media for decades. I know way more media people than I know streamers. But I do way more content with streamers than media people because I respect the grind. And to me, if you're not putting in the grind, I don't have as much respect. So I do respect the people in this category because it is a grind.
Yeah, I think that's it's like a fraternity, right? Whether you maybe you don't jive with somebody personally, but you should respect them if they're putting in the work and
Totally.
knowing how hard it is. I think, and I think I've seen a lot of channels since I've started, come and go very, very quickly because it's like, well, it's what they're doing is easy. You just get up there and have a take. No, that part is the easy part. Trust me. This right here is the best. This is the easy part. Like interacting with y'all is the fun part. It's the coming up with a thumbnail, coming up with the title, coming up with the topics, getting a time that works for you, getting a time that works for your guests, like all the extra stuff that goes in between, promoting the channel, watching your channel start and nobody's watching and push through that and be like, you know what, I'm in it for the love of it. There's so much that goes into it. And then as your channel grows, going back to the other stuff where it's like, now all of a sudden you got a target on your back and all you wanted to do was come into a space and have fun and talk sports, and you got people trolling you left and right and talking this ass, and they're in your DMs and they're
Right.
whatever.
And this guy doesn't like you because of this, and that guy
exactly he
doesn't like you 'cause of
doesn't, yeah,
that.
whatever. And then they're
And
getting personal with you.
Yeah, and the more popular you get, that brings
gets
more
worse.
really cool people to your streams. It also brings more really moronic people to your streams.
Absolutely.
Then you got to deal with all that. That's why I respect Grant so much, because he can somehow cope with the hate. And for me personally, I have a harder time dealing with that. I don't need everybody throwing rose petals at my feet.
No.
And you guys see the way I interact on my show. I'll mix it up with people. I don't mind a good dust up. Somebody said that earlier in the chat, and that's totally true. But I do respect guys like Grant for being able to handle the level of negativity, verbal negativity that's directed towards you and sometimes your family members. As you grow, you get more everything, good, bad, and ugly. And I feel bad. I don't like the ugly and I don't like the bad, but it's just part of the opposite of love ain't hate. It's indifference. And if you get people all wound up in your channel, that's great. But the downside is they're all wound up and they're sometimes pissed off.
Yeah, he handles that so great specifically. And I think that a lot of people look at him handling it now when he's a much bigger entity and they're like, well, he's got people that really support him now too. But when I first started streaming with him, I remember like that was when, Grant used to get all clean shaven for streams. He used to wear half his suit, get on camera, have the SI background.
I love how you said
all of it. Yeah, and he used to do all of that. And at that time, I don't think people really remember like he got like, you want to talk about hate, like that's all he was getting. And he was like grinding in the media space for so long. And then it clicked and it blew up and all of that. And now it's like a little bit more balanced. But for him to get to the point that it had to click, he had to endure a lot and endure a lot of hate. And I don't think people realize how difficult that is. And what I respect about him is that the hate never stopped him from coming and swinging. I think what happens to people the first time they get a little bit of pushback from random people on the internet, it makes them a little gun shy. And now all of a sudden, when you try to talk to them about streaming and all of that, everybody's like, oh, I'm only going to say this because I don't want to say this to piss off these people. Like if you and I are having a conversation to stream, you got to give an opinion so we can do a show. You can't just sit there and say, I'm not going to say these things because I don't want to piss like these 5 people off. And I think that that's the number one important thing I would say. Like, not that I'm in a position to be giving anybody advice on this, but I think just being able to stay true to yourself and being able to put in that research and trust yourself to give whatever opinion if you really want to do it. It's not easy. It's definitely not easy to be able to do that. And like, dude, even the positivity,
I lost
a whole with you too.
Yeah, I lost a whole channel because somebody who didn't know me didn't like me because of sports takes.
Right.
Like, imagine that. Like, so that's, you know what I mean? Like, that's the reality of the situation. It is not easy. So all the things that you don't anticipate, I know that every single person who's creating content is going through those same things. And so for that, I tip my cap to you, or my cap to you. I appreciate you. Max Meyer says if Sam Darnold needs to take over for 4 or 5 games this season, what do you think it looks like? How many games can Purdy miss for a Super Bowl run? It doesn't look as good as it does with Purdy, and I don't want to know what 4 or 5 games looks like. I think they can go a game or two. They can't go any playoff games, and maybe a game or two throughout the regular season. But outside of that, I wouldn't want to see it.
I think I know. I think I know what it looks like. We saw it in the preseason. I think you're going to see some freaking unbelievable throws, and then you're going to see more punts, less continuity, more turnovers, lower points total. You're going to walk away from some games going, "Wow, man, that guy! Did you see that play in the second quarter where he just hit Ayuk in stride, 38 yards down the field? That was a dime." Yeah, but man, when he threw it right to that linebacker in the fourth quarter, oh, that was frustrating. Yeah, I know. So I think you're going to see, more negative plays, and you're going to see more punting. You're going to see some unbelievable throws, maybe some of the best throws you've seen, and you're going to see, the Niners score in the 20s.
Yeah, I think that if you asked me this question in the offseason, I think I'd have had a more confident answer. I think there's something about watching Purdy do all the little things the right way that we haven't been able to see from a Niners quarterback, and it makes it look easy when you have an offense that creates wide open people, and you just need a quarterback who can fit it and make the right decision consistently. And Purdy does that and more when you throw in his athletic ability and is just natural. He has a natural feel for pressure and all of that. And I think Darnold is kind of the example, Krug, that you were talking about. The aesthetics of Darnold look like how the aesthetics of a quarterback should look, but he's the exact opposite of Purdy because Purdy has all the feel required to play. He has the feel for pressure, the feel for the appropriate ball to throw. And Darnold's very robotic and mechanical, where it's like, coach says, drop back 7 yards and throw the ball like this, and I'm going to do that. And then if I throw a pick, I'm going to walk back with the Eli look on my face and be like, when I come back to the post-game presser, be like, oh, yeah, we got to be better. Everybody's got to be better. It's like he's just kind of like a robot and I don't mean that he's not an emotional person. I don't know him, but he's just kind of robotic in everything he goes about doing in terms of being a quarterback. But Purdy has a natural feel where he kind of owns being that person. I think there is that distinction, and I do think it makes a difference. I don't know that they would be 5-0 in those 5 games if they had to start with Sam Darnold. I think the record would be something like 3-2, 2-3, and especially if you could fit them in a part in the schedule where they do have to face the Seattle trio or something like that, or face a Baltimore. I don't know that Sam Darnold would succeed in that kind of a football game. And by the way, that's more of an indictment of what I think of Sam Darnold and what I kind of saw from Sam Darnold in the preseason, because I do think that other quarterbacks might not have maybe the level of success Purdy has had, but certainly success for sure.
For sure. Joey Mellon says, on my way to Tahoe, boys. Keep the show rolling, baby.
North Shore, South Shore. Go check it out. I mean, Tahoe's my favorite, man. I love Tahoe. I love it in August, but I'm sure it's pretty great in September too.
Frank Tom Ocean says he's talking to somebody saying that Ted admitted he was wrong about Brock Purdy.
No, LK.
Okay.
Yeah, he's talking to me. Yeah, no, I
heard
heard
Kruger. I got you. Okay. Sorry.
My kids said Ted Dad says that he's seen the light on Brock. Good, Ted. Good. You'll be happier for it. You'll be happier. Welcome aboard, Ted. Come on down, man. And Ted, I say this with great affinity. This will be fun to come back to.
Juan Torres says, guys, I'm so excited. I'm heading to San Francisco tomorrow for the first time ever. I will be at Levi's this Sunday. Being a 49er fan in Seattle has been rough. Brother, I feel your pain. I grew up in the Pacific Northwest. I totally understand it. I hope you have a hell of a time, you and whoever you're going with. Stay safe, have fun, tailgate, and just take it all in, man. You're going to have a freaking blast. That being said, we're 2.5 hours in. I said 30 minutes ago I had to go. Now I really have to go. Appreciate all the love. Everybody have a blessed weekend. And I know I will be back for sure for the post game. You guys may be back earlier. Make sure that you tap into Larry's channel, Larry Kruger, and then also Vish, his channel. Next week, we're going to be back on Vish's channel. Remember, this thing rotates every week. Next week, back on Vish's. Tap in over there. We'll see you then. Peace.